Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Night Fear. I know many of you listen to these stories to help you fall asleep. So, before you get settled in, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. And if you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. Before the story, a quick message from our sponsor. Some of my favorite memories are tied to thunder. Late summer storms used to roll across the hills in Silver Creek, and my grandfather and I would sit on the porch and just watch them in silence. Those evenings had a particular scent: rain-soaked wood, leather from his old chair, and something warm I still can't name. That scent stuck with me. Now, whenever I want to revisit those memories, I turn to Scentbird, a monthly fragrance subscription service. One of my favorites? Kinetic by Toomey, a blend of Italian mandarin, sandalwood, and vanilla that somehow brings me right back to those porch nights. Another one I love for fall is Cross River Gorilla. Cardamom, green apple, violet leaf, and a hint of smoked leather. It's cozy and just the right kind of mysterious. Scentbird carries premium brands like Gucci, Prada, and Versace, and lets you try over 700 fragrances without buying huge expensive bottles. Right now, with code MRNIGHTMARE55, you can try your first scent for just $8. try.scentbird.com. Check them out. Now for tonight's story. This one took place in the middle of a stormy August night in Silver Creek, Oregon, a town known for its endless trees, winding back roads, and the kind of fog that swallows everything whole. I was 13. That age where being left home alone for the night still felt like a thrill. My parents had finally decided I was mature enough to stay on my own while they drove up to Portland to visit my uncle. Their only rule? Don't leave the house, and don't invite anyone over. That was fine by me. I had the whole place to myself. I could blast my music without hearing my dad yell from upstairs. I could stay up all night if I wanted. And that night, the storm made everything feel even cozier. Thunder rolled in as I watched from the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping soda like it was a cold beer. Eventually, I moved my Xbox downstairs to the den, my dad's man cave. It had the massive TV, surround sound, the whole setup. The room sat level with the backyard and had a sliding glass door that opened to the porch. It always gave me a weird vibe when I was younger, but I'd outgrown that fear. Or so I thought. I booted up Black Ops and joined a party with my friend Cody. I was wearing this clunky old headset where you could only hear other players. No game audio. Didn't matter. For a 13-year-old, I was in heaven. Until the doorbell rang. It was sometime after 9. I paused, told Cody someone was at the door. He told me to check it out, but be careful. I muted my mic, ran up to the front door, and called out, "Who is it?" A male voice answered. "Hey. I need to use a phone." I froze. The voice was flat. Calm. But something about it felt wrong. I didn't respond. I just crept away from the door and back down the stairs, trying not to make a sound. I told Cody what happened. He said, "Yo, dude. Don't open the door. That's weird as hell." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. The doorbell rang again. I waited. Minutes passed. No knocks. No footsteps. Just thunder in the distance and the dull hum of rain hitting the windows. Eventually, I relaxed again. Figured the guy left. I started playing again, fully immersed. Then I heard something behind me. I looked right. The sliding glass door in the den was closing. There was a man standing just inside. Tall. Soaked from the rain. A hoodie clung to his body. He didn't say anything. I dropped the controller and bolted for the office. My headset yanked free as I moved. I slammed the office door shut and locked it just in time to hear the handle jiggle. Violently. The office had 2 doors, one to the den and one to the garage. I stood there, heart pounding, unsure what to do. I barely breathed. Then, from the other side of the door, he spoke. "Little man. I just need to use your phone." His voice was different now. Slurred. Uneven. It started as a knock. Then pounding. "Come on, kid. Just open the door." Then it got worse. "Open the fucking door, you little shit." I jumped. He was full on slamming his body into it now. I knew I had seconds. I ran to the garage door, hit the button to open it. The motor made that awful screechy sound, echoing through the house. I prayed he didn't hear. As soon as it was up just enough, I ducked under and sprinted out into the rain. My bare feet slapped the pavement as I ran to the neighbor's house, Julian and his wife, Claire. They'd known me since I was little. Their dog, Copper, was barking like crazy as I reached their front steps. Julian opened the door, confused, but when I told him what happened, his face turned serious fast. He got the police on the phone, then told me to stay put while Claire wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. We waited by the window until the flashing red and blue lights came down the block. 2 officers stepped out. Julian walked me over to them. I told them everything. From the doorbell to the man in the den. I said I thought the sliding door was locked. But when they asked which door might have been left open, I remembered my dad always left the garage side door cracked in the summer to let the air flow. 2 officers went inside. 5 minutes later, they walked out with a man in cuffs. They made sure he never looked my way. One of the officers asked me, "Do you know this man?" I shook my head. No. They told me he claimed the house was his, and that I was his son. I couldn't process that. I watched as he screamed at the officers from the back seat of the patrol car. His face twisted with anger, and whatever he was on made it worse. Drugs, alcohol, maybe both. His name was John McCarty. He was arrested for trespassing and attempted breaking and entering. My parents pressed charges. But I never really slept the same after that night. Because he knew where I lived. He'd seen my face. Heard my voice. Even though it was ruled a random break-in, I still wonder. Was it? Or did he knock on my door on purpose? I never thought something truly terrifying would ever happen to me. I'm just a regular guy living a pretty uneventful life, one of those folks who thought nothing weird or horrible could ever really happen to them. That's probably why I've always loved creepypasta and true horror story channels on YouTube. You know, the kind you listen to late at night with a cozy blanket and a cup of tea. They were entertaining because they felt so distant from my own reality. But ever since that night, I've listened to those stories a little differently. Now, they scare me in a way I never expected. Because this time, it wasn't fiction. This time, I was the story. It happened sometime around 4 in the morning. I can't say exactly, my phone was face down on the nightstand, and everyone else in the house was asleep. My mom, and both of my grandparents. We live in a quiet little town called Maple Hollow in upstate New York. You know the kind of place, porch lights, picket fences, and barely any crime. But that night, it didn't feel so peaceful. For the past few months, we've been getting hit with heavy summer storms almost every week. And that night storm rolled in early. I'd always found thunderstorms relaxing, especially when I could sit by the window and watch the lightning in the distance. But the wind, there's something about the wind that always unsettled me. It shifts too quickly, soft 1 minute, howling the next, like it's whispering things you're not supposed to hear. This storm was especially nasty. It sounded like gravel was being flung against my window for hours. Still, I was enjoying the noise while scrolling Reddit like usual, when suddenly, bam, the power cut out. No flicker, no warning. Just blackness. I'll admit it creeped me out a little. But I wasn't totally panicked. I had a good charge on my phone and data service, so I kept scrolling, the glow of the screen lighting my face in the dark. Eventually, sleepiness started to catch up with me. I set my phone down, rolled over, and let the sound of the wind lull me to sleep. Or at least, I think I fell asleep. I don't remember anything in between the storm and what happened next. When I woke up again, it was quieter. The storm had passed. Just a soft wind brushing against the house now. I shifted in bed, trying to get comfortable, but my mouth was dry like sandpaper. I tried ignoring it, hoping I'd drift off again, but no luck. My throat was just too dry to ignore. So I sat up, grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and padded toward the kitchen for some water. The moment I cracked open my bedroom door, I was hit with a wall of cold air. The living room felt like a walk-in freezer. Shivering, I pulled on an old hoodie and made my way toward the kitchen. With each step, the wind outside seemed to grow louder. The air around me felt wrong. Heavier. Sharper. I didn't understand why it felt colder inside the house than it had outside during the storm. I reached the kitchen, grabbed a glass from the cabinet, and turned on the tap. As the water flowed, I glanced toward the patio door and froze. It was wide open. The screen door was pulled aside. The wind tugged at the curtains, making them dance like they had minds of their own. My stomach dropped. I tried to rationalize it, maybe Grandpa stepped out earlier and forgot to close it? But that didn't sit right. He's careful. Always locking up before bed. Still, I shut the door, locked it, and hurried back to my room. I closed the door behind me, set the water on my nightstand, and got under the covers. My flashlight stayed on. I wasn't ready to be in total darkness just yet. But I couldn't shake the feeling. That gnawing sense that something was still nearby. I got out of bed, slid my desk chair in front of the door, and double-checked the closet. Just in case. I laid back down again and kept the flashlight on. My hand wrapped tightly around it. It gave off this soft, blue-white glow that made the room feel just a bit safer. And then, it happened. A soft thump under the bed. Followed by the slow, unmistakable creak of metal springs shifting. I froze. Completely still. That's when I realized I never checked under the bed. My heart slammed against my ribs. I could feel my pulse behind my eyes. My breath caught as I leaned over the side of the bed, the flashlight trembling in my hand. And there she was. A woman. Crammed under my bed like some kind of twisted doll. Her skin was pale and stretched thin. Her eyes were bloodshot, bulging. Her teeth, yellow and jagged, grinning in this unnatural way that made my stomach lurch. She stared right at me. Unblinking. Her smile widening. Then, clear as day, she cackled. A high-pitched, unhinged laugh like something straight out of a nightmare. Like a witch from a movie, but real. Right there. Inches away. Every instinct I had screamed run. I threw myself off the bed, shoved the chair aside, and sprinted down the hall to my grandparents' room, yelling for my grandpa the whole way. He opened the door in seconds, already holding a gun. He'd never even told me he had one. Together, we rushed back to my room. My grandma stayed behind us, clutching her robe. As we turned the corner, we saw it, just for a second. A white figure scrambling out of my bedroom window. My grandpa raised the gun and fired, probably a warning shot, but whoever or whatever it was disappeared into the night before we could get a good look. We didn't call the cops. I know. That sounds ridiculous. But what were we supposed to tell them? That a woman hid under my bed, laughed in my face, and ran off into the dark? We didn't have any security cameras. No real evidence. Just fear. My best guess? She saw my flashlight from outside before the power cut, and somehow slipped inside. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she didn't even know what she was doing. But that grin, that laugh, that look in her eyes? It wasn't just sickness. We're getting new locks installed next week. Heavy-duty ones. Every window. Every door. Just for peace of mind. And if you think you're safe because you live in a nice neighborhood, or you know your neighbors, or you lock your front door at night, think again. Because horror doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it's already under your bed. What would you have done? Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Cassie and I decided to spend a quiet weekend up in Coldwater Ridge, a remote little town tucked away in the forests of northern Washington. My uncle left behind a beat-up but functional cabin there, more of a glorified trailer with wood paneling than a true cabin, but to us, it was luxury camping. Running water, electricity, and a working bathroom? That's all we needed. The place wasn't big, maybe 600 square feet tops. Just one bedroom, a pull-out couch in the living room, one tiny bathroom, and a compact kitchen that always smelled a little like propane. But it was peaceful. No neighbors for miles. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears. We had plans to do all the outdoorsy stuff. There was a small archery range out back, some dirt trails for my old ATV, and a nearby clearing perfect for target shooting. We brought supplies, loaded a cooler, and even made a little itinerary. Just us and the trees. Friday night was uneventful. We unpacked, grabbed dinner in town, stocked up at the local store, then came back and curled up watching old movies. It was cozy. Saturday was when we went all in ATV rides, archery, the whole thing. But by mid-afternoon, the sky shifted. Thick gray clouds rolled in like smoke, and the air grew heavy, electric. It smelled like rain. We quickly packed up the gear and stashed everything in the shed before it hit. Sure enough, just as we started dinner and popped in a DVD, the sky opened up. The rain hammered the metal roof like it was trying to get in. Thunder cracked so hard it rattled the cabinets. Instead of staying in, we grabbed our plates and stepped onto the deck, sitting under the awning. The lightning lit up the woods around us in jagged flashes, followed almost instantly by thunderclaps. It felt like we were sitting in the belly of the storm. That's when we heard it. A voice. Faint, distant, but cutting through the rain like someone shouting from the woods. The words weren't clear, just the tone. Urgent. Desperate. Cassie stiffened. Did you hear that? I nodded slowly and stepped to the edge of the deck. The wind blew the rain sideways, soaking my shirt as I squinted toward the tree line. In the flashes of lightning, the woods lit up for split seconds, just enough to catch something. Someone. A figure, standing right at the edge of the trees. Still as a statue. Cassie thought I was messing with her when I told her. She laughed nervously and told me to cut it out, but I wasn't joking. I almost called out, asked if they needed help, but something in my gut stopped me. Something felt off. Still, this whole trip had been my idea, and I didn't want to make her regret coming. So I softened it. Probably a hiker, I said. We'll help if they come up here. She agreed, uneasily. I nudged her back inside and shut the door behind her. But curiosity got the better of me. I stepped back out. The wind was louder now. Rain slapped my face, and the storm rumbled deep in the sky. I scanned the woods again, and then, during a quick flash of lightning, I saw it. Him. He was closer now. Way closer. Maybe 20 feet away. Just standing there. Motionless. Drenched in what looked like bright, almost white clothing. The light made it hard to see details, but I could tell he wasn't moving. Not even a step forward. That stillness, that was the part that chilled me. I bolted back inside and locked the door, Cassie saw the look on my face and went pale. I could barely get the words out. "I don't know who that is," I muttered, almost breathless. She backed into the bedroom, already panicking. I tried to calm her, saying maybe he was just looking for shelter. Maybe we'd hear a knock any second. But there wasn't one. We sat in silence, listening to the storm scream against the windows. Then, footsteps. Heavy, dragging steps on the deck. Despite the roar of the rain, we heard them. Felt them. Then came the sound. Not a knock. Not even a voice. Just a scraping. A fumbling at the door. Like someone trying the handle over and over again. No pattern. No urgency. Just a quiet, persistent shuffling. My stomach dropped. My whole body went tight. Cassie whispered for me to come to the bedroom. I told her to stay hidden, I'd be right there. I turned off the living room lamp and waited a moment in the dark, heart thudding in my ears. Then I crept to the window. I took a deep breath and pulled the curtain back. I looked out the window and saw a pale figure darting away into the rain, vanishing before I could make sense of it. I stood frozen for a second, hoping and praying that whoever it was had finally taken off for good. Just to be safe, I moved quickly to the kitchen window. That one didn't have curtains or blinds, just glass, fogged over from the storm. About halfway there, I stopped cold. Even through the blur of rain streaking down the glass, I could make out a face. Right there. Inches away. Staring in. I shouted loud, sharp, trying to sound tough. "Hey! Get the hell out of here!" They didn't move. And look, I know it sounds like something from a bad horror movie, but our place up in Echo Ridge doesn't have internet, and cell service out there is hit or miss on a good day. During a storm like this? Nothing. Not a single bar. No calls. No texts. No way to reach anyone. There was one thing, though, my dad's old hunting rifle, stashed under the bed in the main room. I left the kitchen and hurried to the bedroom, where Cassidy was still on the bed, pale and biting her nails. She looked up at me like she already knew it had gotten worse. I crouched down, pulled the rifle case from under the bed, and popped the latches. The magazine was already loaded, thank God. I slid it in with a click that cut through the silence like a blade. Cassidy didn't say anything, but her face changed. She knew I wasn't pretending anymore. But we didn't even have time to speak, because just then, there was a loud bang at the bedroom window. It sounded like someone slammed their hand against the glass. Then, a second later, another bang, from the living room, maybe the kitchen. This wasn't just one creep messing around anymore. There were at least two of them. I told Cassidy to stay put, and I made my way to the front door, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the wind outside. I unlocked it slowly, barely breathing, and positioned myself to fire if someone tried to rush in. When I was ready, I yanked the door open and raised the rifle, braced for anything. No one. I stepped out onto the porch, adrenaline pushing me forward, spinning fast to scan every corner of the deck. Then I moved to the stairs and looked down. He was there again, the same guy. Standing in the exact same spot he had been earlier, right below the kitchen window. Just standing there, like he wanted to be seen. He looked up at me. I knew he saw me, but I don't think he realized I was armed. I lifted the rifle and fired one round into the air. The crack of the shot split through the storm. "OHSHIT," the guy screamed, his voice deep, panicked. He turned and bolted into the darkness. A second voice, maybe a third, shouted from somewhere nearby as they ran, their yells fading fast into the storm. And just like that, it was quiet again. Just the wind. Just the rain. Just me standing there with a gun and a racing heart. I don't know how many of them there were, two at least, probably three. Maybe some twisted prank. Maybe something worse. I don't care. If anyone had come up on that deck while I was standing there, I swear I wouldn't have hesitated. They weren't there for help. I'm absolutely sure of that. The next morning was Sunday. We didn't stick around. We packed our things and left. No broken locks, no slashed tires, just that lingering sense of something wrong. I double-checked every lock, brought home anything worth taking, and slammed the car doors shut. In all the years my family's owned that cabin, nothing like this had ever happened. And it changed the way I felt about being alone out there. That night rewired something in me. I've gone back a couple of times since, when my parents are around. But I'll never go back up to Echo Ridge alone again. Not after that. Have you ever had someone stare at you through a window and not move? Because once you see that face, you never really stop seeing it. Sometimes, people stumble across things that are just wrong. Places that feel off. Objects that make your stomach twist. This next story comes from a listener named David, who sent in both his account and some video footage. It was late August, 2020. The air in Maple Ridge, Pennsylvania was thick with that end-of-summer stillness, warm but fading. David and his friend, Josh, were bored one afternoon and decided to try out the Randonautica app, just to see what kind of weird places it would take them. If you've never used it, Randonautica generates random coordinates called anomalies. These can be attractors or voids, dense or sparse clusters of random points that are supposedly tied to your intent. Think of it like a digital urban legend generator. They generated 4 anomalies in total. The first 3? Duds, 2 ended up in someone's backyard and 1 was on a private trail with no access. But the 4th one looked promising. A stretch of woods just outside town, near an old dirt road behind a shuttered campground. The coordinates had a radius of about 470 meters, a pretty large search area, but it didn't take long before things got weird. They parked on the gravel shoulder and started walking a narrow, overgrown path. David filmed the whole thing. About 10 minutes in, they found something unusual, a folded piece of paper, jammed through the end of a small stick stuck upright in the ground. On the outside, in shaky handwriting, it read, "Write down your cell phone number." When they unfolded it, the inside said, "I can give you a phone number or even an email address. Give me your mail address and I'll send it to you." That was it. No context. Just taped to this branch with cheap Scotch tape, like it had been waiting for someone. Against better judgment, David actually wrote his number down and stuck the note back. And that's when they noticed something else. Just a few feet from the stick, draped across a fallen tree limb, were 6 women's bras. All different colors, all different sizes. No tags, no packaging. Just there. They looked fresh, definitely not weathered, and it had rained 3 days earlier, but the paper was bone dry. Whatever had been left here hadn't been there long. Other things they found nearby. 2 opened packs of wet condoms. A rusty tin pot, blackened at the bottom like it had been used in a fire. And bits of shredded fabric on the ground, half buried in leaves. They left soon after but came back the next day, on August 7th. The note with David's number? Gone. And then, 3 days later, he got a text. Just one word. "Hi." He replied, "Hi. Who's this?" The response? His home address. No name. No context. Just the address. David blocked the number immediately and hasn't heard from them since. To this day, he doesn't know who or what was waiting at that anomaly point. But someone, or something, out there definitely knows who he is. Have you ever used Randonautica? Or stumbled on something that just didn't feel right? Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. This next video was originally posted by a young woman named Taylor Reynolds, who documented her unsettling experience using the Randonautica app. Taylor had seen the trend all over TikTok and finally gave in to curiosity. She downloaded the app and let it generate a random location not far from her home in Maple Falls, Washington. The pin dropped near a wooded trail behind an old, dried-up creek bed about 1.5 miles from her house. "I've been seeing all these crazy randonaut stories," she says in the video. "So I figured, why not? I'm gonna check out this spot real quick, it's not far." The woods seem quiet at first. Peaceful, even. It looks like any random location the app might lead someone to. But then Taylor stumbles upon something disturbing, a cluster of torn notebook pages, each filled with unsettling crayon drawings, some childlike, others too precise. She pans the camera across the drawings and mutters nervously, "Okay, maybe I'm just spooking myself. I swear I keep hearing something." Then, clear as day, a faint voice echoes through the trees. "Play with me." It sounds like a child's voice, but before anything else is captured, the video cuts off. A few days later, Taylor returns to the same creek bed during daylight. She's uneasy but wants to prove it was just her imagination. Only now, there are new drawings even more disturbing than before. One sheet features a crudely drawn sigil of Baphomet, while others depict shadowy figures and words scrawled in red ink. As she flips through the drawings, the voice returns. Again, a child's voice, but this time it whispers something unintelligible. Taylor doesn't react at first. But the moment she hears it clearly, she bolts, and once again, the footage cuts. Later, after posting the video, a follower points out something chilling, what looks like a child's pale face peering from behind a tree in the background. Taylor insists she was alone. "No one was with me," she says. "Tell me if that doesn't look like a freaking ghost, kid, 'cause I have no clue anymore." In a final video, Taylor flips through a weathered journal she found tucked under a pile of rocks near the creek. Each page contains stranger and darker messages. On her last visit, she finds a makeshift Ouija board scribbled onto a piece of cardboard, and a large rusted knife lying next to it. She never returned after that. And whatever was happening out there remains a mystery. Late-night internet deep dives can be a strange place. And as with most things posted online, there's no definitive way to prove whether this entire series of clips was staged. But something about it just sticks with you. It was the torn-up notebook pages, aged and yellowed, covered in eerie sketches. And then, the image of the child's face. Distorted. Unsettling. Real or not? That's for the viewer to decide. This next story was submitted by a listener named Davy S. One night, while scrolling through TikTok in her apartment, Davy stumbled onto a video about a group of teens using an app called Randonautica. According to the story, the app had led them to a remote stretch of beach, where they discovered a suitcase. What was inside, they didn't say, just that it was disturbing. Davy couldn't stop thinking about it. So she showed the video to her roommate, Ash, and the two were instantly hooked. They decided to try the app for themselves. That same evening, they invited 2 more friends over, Misa and Beck, and gathered in Davy's room to figure out how the app worked. They entered a search radius of about 18 miles from their place. After clicking the button to generate coordinates, the app prompted them to choose an intention. They chose one word, creepy. The location the app generated? Just 3 streets over. That hit differently. Davy lived in a quiet part of rural West Virginia, near the edge of an old mining town called Silver Hollow. At the bottom of the hill, a network of overgrown trails led to the ruins of a steel mill, long abandoned. The place had always creeped them out growing up, but they'd never actually explored it. Now, they were about to. The location brought them to a long, winding road, barely wide enough for one car, with no streetlights and no houses in sight. As Davy turned onto the road, she read the faded sign aloud, Gravestone Hollow Road. And just like that, the energy in the car shifted. The chatter stopped. No one laughed. Davy drove forward slowly, surrounded by dense trees and absolute darkness. It was just past 1 a.m., and not a single street lamp lit the way. After a few minutes, the app said they'd arrived. Davy pulled the car off to the side of the road, engine running. The four of them sat there in silence, looking out at a narrow path cutting through the woods. The trail was barely visible, except for the break in the trees and a faint rustling in the brush. All at once, they felt it. Like they weren't alone. They locked the car doors, but it didn't help. Something about being out there, with just a flashlight, one pocket knife, and a phone battery barely hanging on, made them all feel exposed. They debated getting out. Even joked about it. But deep down, none of them wanted to move. Then Misa said it. "Do you feel like we're being watched?" Nobody answered. They didn't need to. Davy turned the key, and the engine hummed louder. She eased the car forward, deciding to keep driving rather than head into the woods. The road kept going, tighter and darker than before. Just trees. No turns. No other roads. Occasionally, a dim street lamp flickered, offering nothing but brief glimpses of the woods beyond. Eventually, Davy grew tired. She stopped, backed up slowly, and did a tight three-point turn in the middle of the narrow road to head back home. But they'd have to pass the trail again. As they approached, Davy kept her eyes on the rearview mirror. That's when she saw him. A tall man, standing at the edge of the woods. Hood up. Not moving. Not walking. Just standing there right where the trail began. She didn't say anything to the others. Just pressed the gas harder. Late-night internet deep dives can be a strange place. And as with most things posted online, there's no definitive way to prove whether this entire series of clips was staged. But something about it just sticks with you. It was the torn-up notebook pages, aged and yellowed, covered in eerie sketches. And then, the image of the child's face. Distorted. Unsettling. Real or not? That's for the viewer to decide. This next story was submitted by a listener named Davy S. One night, while scrolling through TikTok in her apartment, Davy stumbled onto a video about a group of teens using an app called Randonautica. According to the story, the app had led them to a remote stretch of beach, where they discovered a suitcase. What was inside, they didn't say, just that it was disturbing. Davy couldn't stop thinking about it. So she showed the video to her roommate, Ash, and the two were instantly hooked. They decided to try the app for themselves. That same evening, they invited two more friends over, Misa and Beck, and gathered in Davy's room to figure out how the app worked. They entered a search radius of about 18 miles from their place. After clicking the button to generate coordinates, the app prompted them to choose an intention. They chose one word, creepy. The location the app generated? Just 3 streets over. That hit differently. Davy lived in a quiet part of rural West Virginia, near the edge of an old mining town called Silver Hollow. At the bottom of the hill, a network of overgrown trails led to the ruins of a steel mill, long abandoned. The place had always creeped them out growing up, but they'd never actually explored it. Now, they were about to. The location brought them to a long, winding road, barely wide enough for one car, with no streetlights and no houses in sight. As Davy turned onto the road, she read the faded sign aloud, Gravestone Hollow Road. And just like that, the energy in the car shifted. The chatter stopped. No one laughed. Davy drove forward slowly, surrounded by dense trees and absolute darkness. It was just past 1 a.m., and not a single street lamp lit the way. After a few minutes, the app said they'd arrived. Davy pulled the car off to the side of the road, engine running. The four of them sat there in silence, looking out at a narrow path cutting through the woods. The trail was barely visible, except for the break in the trees and a faint rustling in the brush. All at once, they felt it. Like they weren't alone. They locked the car doors, but it didn't help. Something about being out there, with just a flashlight, one pocket knife, and a phone battery barely hanging on, made them all feel exposed. They debated getting out. Even joked about it. But deep down, none of them wanted to move. Then Misa said it. "Do you feel like we're being watched?" Nobody answered. They didn't need to. Davy turned the key, and the engine hummed louder. She eased the car forward, deciding to keep driving rather than head into the woods. The road kept going, tighter and darker than before. Just trees. No turns. No other roads. Occasionally, a dim street lamp flickered, offering nothing but brief glimpses of the woods beyond. Eventually, Davy grew tired. She stopped, backed up slowly, and did a tight three-point turn in the middle of the narrow road to head back home. But they'd have to pass the trail again. As they approached, Davy kept her eyes on the rearview mirror. That's when she saw him. A tall man, standing at the edge of the woods. Hood up. Not moving. Not walking. Just standing there right where the trail began. She didn't say anything to the others. Just pressed the gas harder. They made it home a few minutes later. Shaken, but safe. Everyone tried to brush it off and went to bed around 2 a.m. The next day, Beck went home. Ash had work, so Davy dropped her off. Misa, who had a few hours to kill, decided to stay and hang out a bit longer. At some point, the two started talking again about the trail. "It's daylight now," Misa said. "Might not feel so creepy." So they went back. This time, they came prepared, phones charged, car keys in hand, a small pocket knife in Davy's back pocket. The path they hadn't dared to take last night led uphill, something they hadn't noticed before in the dark. With each step, the trees thinned out until they reached a clearing. And what they found there didn't feel like some forgotten patch of forest. It felt wrong. Scattered across the clearing were piles of garbage, fast food wrappers, rusted cans, broken furniture. Tires stacked on tires. But the thing that made both girls stop walking were the mattresses. There were at least 5 of them. And they weren't tossed around or abandoned randomly. They were made. Sheets tucked in. Pillows fluffed. Blankets laid neatly across the tops. The beds looked used. Something deep in Davy's stomach turned. "Let's go," she said, already backing away. They made it halfway back down the trail when Misa stopped. She pointed into a ditch just off the side of the path. "What's that?" There, hidden in the brush, was a red cooler. They hadn't seen it on the way up. Curious but cautious, they stepped down into the ditch to get a better look. The smell hit them before they got close. A thick, rotten stench that made their eyes water. Then Davy noticed it, a dead cat, its body bloated and swarmed with flies, just a few feet from the cooler. Trying not to get too close, Davy grabbed a branch and nudged the cooler upright. It was heavier than expected. Something sloshed inside. She braced herself and pried the lid open just a few inches. A wave of hot, putrid air burst out, filled with the smell of decay. Maggots spilled out over the edge. Then she saw a dark, matted hair. No scalp. No skin. Just a sodden clump of black hair. Davy dropped the stick and bolted. "Get in the car," she shouted. Misa didn't ask twice. As they tore down the road, Misa demanded to know what was in the cooler. But Davy couldn't speak, she was too close to throwing up. They drove until the road widened slightly, hoping to find a driveway or a turnaround. Finally, Davy pulled off to the side and made another tight three-point turn. And once again, they had to pass the trail. Only this time, something had changed. There were broken planks of wood scattered across the road, definitely not there before. And in the woods, standing just beyond the trees, was the same hooded man. Watching. Davy drove straight over the boards, cracking her front bumper, and didn't slow down until they reached the main road. She and Misa returned just once after that, during the day, to record what they could. That footage is what you've been seeing. Davy deleted the Randonautica app shortly after. She hasn't used it since. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Before Davy and her friends even considered using the app, they had seen a video online that shook them to their core, and that video was exactly what pushed them to try it themselves. It came from a couple of TikTok users who had both captured different angles of the same disturbing discovery. In the video, their voices were nervous but excited. "Okay, so she made it," one of them said, breathless. "She's calling the cops. We need to see if this is real or just trash." The app had led them to a rocky jetty near Driftwood Point, just off the coast in a quiet section of Olympia, Washington. Down below the wooden bridge, wedged in between jagged rocks and slick seaweed, was a black suitcase that had clearly been tossed there by the tide. Curious, and maybe too bold, the teens climbed down with sticks in hand, poking at the suitcase from a distance. As they got closer, the expressions on their faces changed. There was a foul, unmistakable odor leaking from the suitcase, and something about the way it sat, slumped, like it had weight, told them this wasn't old clothes or someone's garbage. They called the police right away. But in that part of Washington, response times can be slow, especially along the coast. It took 3, maybe 4 hours before officers arrived. By then, the tide had come in and pulled the suitcase farther out. A specialized dive team had to be called in to retrieve it. What they found inside was horrifying. Wrapped in black plastic bags were the dismembered remains of 2 people, Jessica Lewis, 35, and Austin Wenner, 27. They had been missing for over a week. Their killer? Their landlord, a man named Michael Dudley. Investigators would later learn that the couple had gotten into a heated argument with Dudley over rent. Neighbors reported hearing shouting, then gunshots, from inside the house 10 days before the suitcase ever appeared. The original videos were eventually removed from TikTok. With more people using Randonautica, a viral app that sends users to random GPS coordinates based on their intent, it's only a matter of time before someone stumbles into something they were never supposed to see. Have you ever found something you couldn't explain, something you wished you hadn't seen? I've always found peace in hiking. After a rough breakup, the kind that shakes you to your core, I packed my Jeep and started driving west. I just turned 32, and up until 2 months ago, I thought I was going to marry the woman I'd been with for 4 years. But I caught her cheating with a guy I considered one of my best friends. Yeah. Total betrayal. So, this trip wasn't just a vacation. It was about putting distance between me and the wreckage of my old life. That's how I ended up winding through the foggy hills of northern Washington, a few hours east of Seattle, where the Cascades meet the edge of forgotten logging towns. I'd been eyeing the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest for a while. Lots of trails, lots of history, and more importantly, lots of isolation. I chose a lesser-known stretch near a decommissioned fire lookout tower. No signs, no marked trails, just the kind of quiet wilderness I craved. The access road was a narrow gravel path, chewed up by time and storms. I drove until the road became too rough to continue, then parked beside a thick wall of evergreens. When I stepped out, the scent of wet pine hit me instantly. Cool air, overcast sky. No cars. No people. Just how I like it. I geared up and checked my phone. 0 bars. Perfect. I made a mental note of my location and loaded the offline map I'd saved ahead of time. A lot of people don't realize your GPS still works without service. But this story isn't about me getting lost, not exactly. My goal was a cliffside vantage point about 3 or 4 miles in. The hike was steep and rugged roots, moss-covered stones, and narrow game trails. After about an hour, a light drizzle started falling through the canopy. Now, here's the thing about me, I hate hiking in the rain. Always have. The wet gear, the slippery footing, it just ruins the rhythm. So, annoyed, I turned around to head back to the Jeep. That's when things went sideways. When I emerged from the tree line, my stomach dropped. My SUV was still there, but all 4 tires were flat. Slashed. I froze. That kind of damage doesn't happen by accident. Someone had done this. I scanned the forest, the narrow road, the space behind my car. Nothing. Just the sound of rain tapping leaves and dripping off branches. My pulse started climbing. With no cell signal and no drivable vehicle, I had 2 options: either hike the 20-something miles back down the access road to the highway, or climb back to the summit and try for service. I figured if someone had done this, walking the open road might make me an easy target. So, against every screaming instinct in my body, I headed back into the forest and started uphill again. The air felt heavier. About halfway to the summit, I heard it. Rustling. Behind me. Maybe 50 feet back. It stopped when I stopped. Moved when I moved. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just pressed forward, moving faster, keeping my head low like prey, pretending not to know it's being hunted. The forest around me had changed. The drizzle had picked up, and long shadows crept between the trees as the sun began to dip below the ridgeline. My boots slipped a few times on wet rock, but I didn't dare slow down. Eventually, after what felt like forever, I broke through the trees and reached the summit. The view would have been breathtaking: rolling gray mountains, mist clinging to the trees, but I didn't stop to admire it. My phone buzzed 1 bar of signal. I called 911 immediately, voice shaking, and told them where to find my vehicle. I told the dispatcher about the tires. About the feeling of being followed. About how I had roadside assistance through AAA. She said help was on the way. I hung up and let out a long breath. Someone finally knew where I was. I still had a massive problem to deal with. I'd have to find my way back through the woods before night fell, and somehow avoid whoever was out there watching me. Marching straight through the trees felt like asking to walk right into a trap. After thinking it through, I decided the best option was to move in a wide arc, almost a half circle, back toward the parking area. That way, I might avoid any hidden paths or eyes waiting along the direct route. I walked alongside the edge of the ridge for a bit before cutting back into the forest from a new angle. The part 1 was heading into? I hadn't studied it yet. So I pulled up the topo map on my phone, hoping my sense of direction wouldn't fail me. For the first few minutes, everything felt fine. No cracking branches, no heavy footsteps, just the fading daylight and the distant rustle of wind through trees. But then, right after thinking that maybe I'd been imagining things, I heard a distinct snap to my left. I froze and turned, but saw nothing between the trees. Just shadows. A few minutes later, another sound, this one directly behind me. That's when the realization hit me like ice water. There wasn't just one person out there. There were multiple. More than one set of eyes. My heart rate jumped. I picked up my pace into a light jog, but my nerves were already unraveling. And then, I saw it. Just off the trail, partially hidden by tall grass and rotting brush, was a small, makeshift campsite. Logs had been arranged in a loose circle around a fire pit, maybe a dozen of them. It looked like it had been used recently. The ashes were still gray. Someone had been here, maybe earlier today. I didn't stop to investigate. I jogged around it, feeling a wave of dread wash over me. My instincts screamed at me to keep moving. I kept glancing over my shoulder, trying to spot anything, anyone. Then came the worst moment yet. To my right, movement. This time, I turned quickly enough to catch it, a flash of white and the blur of a foot as someone darted behind a tree. That was it. I took off into a full sprint, lungs burning, heart hammering. The forest lit up with noise, branches snapping, footsteps pounding. They weren't trying to be stealthy anymore. Whoever they were, they wanted me to know I was being chased. I didn't dare look back. But I felt them gaining. Eventually, I couldn't help it, I glanced over my shoulder. There were at least 6 of them. All dressed in white. All running straight at me. The next few minutes felt endless. It was the kind of fear that drains your body while flooding it with adrenaline. Every second, I thought I'd collapse. But I couldn't stop. If I did, I didn't think I'd ever make it out. Then, just as I was beginning to stumble, I saw it, the gravel lot. My car. And parked right beside it, a sheriff's cruiser. I practically collapsed when I reached him, nearly throwing up from panic and exhaustion. He rushed over and caught me before I hit the ground. I turned around, expecting them to be right behind me. But the woods were empty. The officer said he'd already called in roadside assistance. I thanked him, still trembling. Once I caught my breath, I gave him a full report, and what he told me sent a chill down my spine. He said this part of upstate New York, specifically the woods outside of Ash Hollow, had a reputation. Old communities. Isolated homesteads. Groups that didn't take kindly to outsiders. Some rooted in forgotten sects of Christianity. Others, not so much. He said I might have stumbled into something I wasn't meant to see. A gathering. A ritual. Who knows? What stayed with me all these years is this: if they were just protecting their land, why not say so? Why slash my tires? Why stalk me for miles through the trees? I don't have answers. Just questions that follow me like shadows. I think about that night all the time. Have you ever felt eyes on you, even when you're alone? Because I still do. I wouldn't call myself a pro hiker, but I've been doing it for decades. I've walked the Appalachian Trail, hiked parts of the Rockies, wandered through Yosemite, Zion, and more. I've always had this hunger for something new. Something that makes the heart race just a little faster. Lately, my hobby's taken a strange turn. I started scanning Google Earth late at night, looking for forgotten woodlands, big green spaces without names. I'd pick one that looked remote, print out the satellite view, and go exploring. Weird? Sure. But something about it thrilled me. The risk of getting lost, the quiet. It felt like going back in time. To keep myself from actually getting lost, I made little biodegradable trail markers, small reflective stickers I could slap on tree bark. When I turned around, I'd peel them off on the way back. It was clean. It worked. No one's ever gotten lost with my system. At least, not until now. This time, I had my eyes set on the Gorham Pines, an old patch of woods just outside of Coldwater, New York. If you've never heard of it, well, not many have. The place has a weird reputation, full of stories about people vanishing in strange lights in the woods. But honestly, I'm not superstitious. Ghost stories never did it for me. I like facts, not folklore. The forest is technically off-limits. Signs warn people to stay out. But I've never been one to let that stop me. In fact, the promise of being alone out there made it even more appealing. I reached Coldwater by mid-morning and parked near an old, crumbling service road. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that makes everything feel a bit quieter than it should be. I entered the woods around noon, wanting to be out long before dark. From the moment I stepped in, something felt off. It wasn't the trees or the cold air. It was the silence. Not just peaceful quiet, but total stillness. No birds, no rustling leaves, no insects. just my boots pressing into the soft dirt and my own breathing. I'd been in forests like this before, places where wildlife just doesn't linger. But this felt different. It was the kind of quiet that pressed in around you. That made you feel like you were being watched. Still, I kept going, placing a sticker on every fifth tree, keeping a mental note of where I'd been. I figured I'd eventually hear a bird or squirrel or something. But I didn't. And after a while, the silence stopped bothering me. I actually started to enjoy the calm. The cold air was clean. The woods were still. It was peaceful. Then came the sound. It didn't build. It didn't creep up. It hit all at once. A low, drawn-out moan. Hollow and wounded, like something in pain but not quite human. Not quite animal, either. I froze. The sound seemed to come from deep in the woods, not far from where I stood. My mind raced, maybe a deer injured in the underbrush? But it didn't sound right. It had too much breath behind it. Too much intention. I stood there for a moment, listening, heart pounding. Could have been wind, I thought. Just the trees. But no. There was no breeze. Not a single leaf stirred. I shook the thought and told myself it was nothing. Maybe some animal I wasn't familiar with. I turned away from the sound and kept walking. You're probably wondering why I didn't turn back right then. I wonder that, too. I told myself that if I heard one more strange thing, I'd call it. That was my deal with myself. As I walked, I started to overthink. If it was an injured animal, how did it get hurt? No way I'd miss the sound of a gunshot. Was someone out here hunting illegally? Or was it something else? That's when I saw the trees. The one right in front of me had long, uneven scratches. Not initials or names, just random, violent gouges. I looked around and saw more of them on the trees nearby. Some looked fresher than others. Something about those marks felt wrong. I turned around. No hesitation this time. My instincts were screaming. I started following my stickers back the way I came, pulling each one off as I passed. But then I saw it. Up ahead was a dark hole in the earth. It looked like a cave entrance, maybe even a den. My breath caught. I knew I hadn't passed that before. No way I'd missed something that obvious. That's when I noticed something worse. My stickers, the ones I'd placed carefully at shoulder height, were now barely at my waist. Someone had moved them. My blood turned cold. I whipped around and started running. Fast. My chest felt tight, my brain trying to catch up. Had someone really been following me? Watching me? I didn't want to believe it, but nothing else made sense. Who would do that? And why? I didn't slow down. I couldn't. My direction was guesswork now, my trail had been tampered with. Still, I had to keep moving. I didn't care about stealth. The forest was so quiet, every step echoed. I stopped long enough to yank out my phone. One bar of signal. Just one. I loaded up my GPS and found my parked car's location. I figured out the direction and started moving fast. Then, just as I started to breathe easier, the wailing came back. Louder this time. Closer. Not behind trees or deep in the woods, right behind me. It sounded like whatever it was had caught up. But every time I turned to look, there was nothing. Just empty woods and cold air. I ran harder than I ever had in my life. 10 minutes felt like an hour. But finally, I saw it, the road. The edge of the forest. And then, as suddenly as it began, the wailing stopped. I didn't wait around. I got into my car, locked the doors, and tore out of there like the ground was on fire. That day broke something in me. I haven't gone hiking since. I've told myself over and over that it was just some hermit. Some creep who saw me wandering in and decided to mess with me. Maybe he used a whistle or speaker to make that sound. Maybe it was all just a prank. But there are gaps in that theory. How could someone keep pace with me in total silence? How'd they move the stickers so fast? And that cave. I never saw it on satellite view. I never saw it on the way in. Maybe there's a reason that forest is closed to the public. You ever see something you couldn't explain? Something that made you question everything you thought was real? Because I have. And it's still out there. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. My dad had this massive man cave down in the basement. Fridge always stocked with beer, big leather couches, neon signs, even a dartboard. And the best part? My parents never bothered us down there. They were just glad we weren't out causing trouble. Our house sat on the edge of Pine Hollow, a sleepy town tucked between hills and thick pine forests. Out back, our land stretched all the way to the edge of the woods. If you hiked through the trees for about 15 minutes, you'd come out on this gravel back road. And across that road? Lake Ashcroft. That lake was everything to me growing up. I'd sneak off there to think, to smoke, to just be. I had cut so many holes in the rusted chain-link fence that the county eventually gave up trying to patch them. Technically, it was government property off-limits to the public. But it was my sanctuary. That night, my buddies and I were playing pool in the basement. Some loud EDM track was bouncing off the walls when Chester threw out the idea, let's go hike to the lake. Honestly, we were getting bored. And the sun hadn't dipped below the horizon yet, so the timing felt right. There were 5 of us, me, Chester, Rick, Jasper, and Malik. Rick and Malik were already cracking beers for the walk. They were always the ones trying to keep the buzz going. I'd had a couple myself, so I was good. The woods were still damp from an earlier storm, but we were already committed. Once we got through the trees and slipped past the hole in the fence, we made our way along the edge of Lake Ashcroft. We stopped at the overlook, a rocky cliff about 10 feet above the water. It was our usual hangout spot. But something felt off that evening, maybe the way the wind rustled the trees, or how quiet the lake was. Chester wanted to keep walking, so we decided to circle around to the far side. There was a place we called the beach, a smooth stretch of shoreline with soft pebbles and tall grass. Peaceful, usually. After about 20 minutes of walking through the brush and hopping fallen logs, we reached the far edge of the lake. That's when things got weird. Malik suddenly held up his hand. Do you see that? We all turned. He was pointing down the shoreline, maybe 100 yards away. A tall figure had just stepped out of the woods and was dragging something across the ground toward the lake. We went dead silent. At first, we thought it was just another hiker. But the way the figure moved, slow, almost heavy, felt wrong. Then we saw what he was dragging. A large black trash bag. One of those thick contractor bags. It was heavy. You could tell by the way he had to pause every few steps, yanking it over the uneven ground. We all exchanged looks. Nobody said it, but we were thinking the same thing. People had been found in that lake before, bodies. It was one of those local stories folks whispered about but never said out loud. The guy reached the shoreline and crouched over the bag. He didn't move for a long time. Just knelt there like he was praying or checking something. We thought that was our chance to slip away unnoticed. But before we could even take a step, Chester hissed, "Wait! Look!" From the tree line, 3 more figures appeared. 2 were dragging more black bags. The third had a kayak hoisted over his shoulders. That's when the unease turned to dread. I suddenly felt sick. Cold. Pine Hollow was just 10 minutes from Millstone, a town with one of the highest crime rates in the state. We'd always joked about bodies turning up in Ashcroft, but now it didn't feel like a joke anymore. Something about the way they moved, like they'd done this before. Routine. Practiced. We crouched down, frozen. I remember the crunch of twigs under Rick's foot and the way Malik's breathing got loud all of a sudden. That was when I realized we might not be alone anymore. It started with the man in the kayak. We were crouched low, hidden behind a cluster of pine trees near the edge of the lake behind my house in Pine Hollow, Missouri. The first guy climbed into the kayak while the other three hauled a large, lumpy black garbage bag and laid it across his lap. Without a word, he paddled to the center of the reservoir. We watched, frozen, as he tipped the bag into the water. It vanished beneath the surface with a hollow splash. He came back, grabbed another bag, and did it again. Then again. 3 trips in total. The silence was so thick it felt like the trees were holding their breath. And then, like something straight out of a nightmare, my phone rang. That cheesy ringtone, some pop song I never bothered to change, cut through the quiet like a knife. I fumbled to silence it, but I was too slow. The men turned. All 4 of them. Their heads snapped toward the trees, their bodies rigid like animals sensing danger. We ran. The spell was broken. The dark lake, the fog, the shadows, it all spun into chaos. Rick glanced back and shouted that they were chasing us. And they were. Let me tell you, running through a forest at night isn't like in the movies. It's roots, thorns, and tree limbs clawing at your arms and face. Every branch feels like it's trying to trip you. Add a shot of panic and too many drinks, and you might as well be running through quicksand. We scrambled down the hill, tore across the shoreline, and pushed into the trees on the other side, aiming for the broken section of fence we used to get in. But in that moment, my mind blanked. Between the fear and the adrenaline, I couldn't remember where the hole in the fence was. I hit the fence first, Rick and Hassan right behind me, panting hard. Chester caught up seconds later. I started dragging my hand along the old wood, looking for that weak spot, but everything looked the same. The panic surged. We were running blind along the fence when Rick suddenly pointed and shouted. The hole. Just ahead. We dove for it. I pushed Chester through, and as I turned back, I heard it, branches cracking, footsteps close behind. Too close. We didn't stop running. Through the last stretch of woods. Across my backyard. Finally, home. That's when Hassan pulled out his phone and called the police. We all huddled on my porch, trying to catch our breath, trying not to throw up. I didn't even care about trespassing charges. My hands were still shaking. The scariest part? That trail from the lake to my house wasn't long. Not at all. If those men wanted to, they could have followed us. They probably saw exactly where we went. When the cops arrived, we told them everything. They searched the area with flashlights and even looked around my yard. That's when I saw one of the officers freeze. Muddy footprints. Right by my backyard fence. The officer turned to me and asked if they were ours. No, I said, my voice shaking. Why would I climb over my own fence? They didn't find anyone else that night. But they told us they'd look into it, and to my surprise, they actually did. 3 days later, I woke up to breaking news. Divers had pulled 3 bodies from the lake. 3. The story was everywhere. Local news, online headlines. My parents were horrified. 4 weeks, none of us slept well. My mom swore she saw people watching the house from the woods. Once, she said she saw a camera flash through the trees. That winter, we moved. No one was ever arrested. The police never found out who those men were or why they dumped those bodies. It faded from the headlines, like most horrible things eventually do. But last week, I read something that made my stomach sink. A teenager drowned in that same reservoir. No witnesses. No explanation. It brought everything back. The trees. The bags. The footprints. That lake is cursed. I'm sure of it. And I still wonder how many other stories it's keeping hidden beneath its cold, black water. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Let me tell you something strange. It might sound made up, but I promise this really happened. Back when I was in high school, there was this one kid, let's just call him Damien. That's not his real name, obviously, but I'm honestly too uneasy to write it down. You'll understand why soon enough. Damien was off. He claimed he was a demon. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean, he seriously told people he wasn't human. He had this haunted look in his eyes, like he was staring past you, or maybe straight through. He didn't talk much. Most teachers kept their distance. Even adults found something deeply unsettling about him. He wore the same dull gray hoodie every single day, like a uniform. It looked crusty and never washed, and yeah, he smelled like it. He was a little shorter than average, skinny, pale. His hoodie was always up, and he never took off his sunglasses. Ever. Inside, outside, day or night, it didn't matter. Eventually, teachers gave up trying to get him to remove them. And then came the weird part. He didn't have friends. Not really. But sometimes, he would adopt people. That's what he called it. One day, totally out of nowhere, he'd walk up to you and say, "You're adopted." No explanation. No joke. Just that. Like it meant something serious. Apparently, being adopted by him meant you were protected. From what, exactly? He never said. Maybe from him. Maybe from something else. Either way, he didn't adopt many people. I was one of the few. Looking back, I think he had a crush on me. That might have been part of it. Now, all of this happened in Ashfield, Ohio, small, boring town, the kind with cornfields, broken-down barns, and one too many gas stations. It's the sort of place where everyone knows your middle name and your grandma's apple pie recipe. Another girl in our group, Madison, was also adopted. His feelings for her were way more obvious. Everyone teased her about it, and she hated it. One fall afternoon, a few of us, me, Madison, Lena, and Derek, were hanging out on the old dugouts behind the high school baseball field. Just wasting time like teenagers do. Somehow, the conversation shifted to Damien and his crush on Madison. We were joking, laughing, being loud about it. I can't remember the nickname we used for him, but I do remember Lena slipping up and saying Damien's real name out loud. 3 times. And I swear, on everything I swear, he just appeared. Out of nowhere. He was suddenly standing right there on top of the dugout, holding a baseball bat. He didn't swing it or say anything. Just stood there, staring with those unreadable eyes. It wasn't jump-scare horror, it was slow, crawling dread. The kind that sinks into your skin. I gave him a nervous little wave. He nodded. Then he stepped off the dugout and walked away without a word. After a beat, we all exploded into nervous laughter. It was funny, kind of. But deep down, I felt cold. Like something was really wrong. It only got worse from there. A few weeks later, I was at Lena's house. We were upstairs in her room, talking, laughing, probably gossiping about something dumb. Her parents were home. Everything was normal. Then it happened again. We said Damien's name 3 times, unintentionally, while laughing about the weird dugout thing. 10 minutes later, we heard the front door slam. We figured someone else had dropped by. Lena's house was like that. Everyone came and went without warning. Her parents were super relaxed about it. But when we came downstairs, her mom was already at the door. And standing there, inside the house, was Damien. I froze. He was just there, chatting quietly with her mom like he had been invited. She asked him what he was doing, and he said, calm as ever, I was summoned. That's what he said. Summoned. Her mom was polite, told him it wasn't a good time, and he left. No drama, no yelling. Lena and I went back upstairs, shaken. The timing. The words. It was too perfect. Too bizarre to ignore. He had shown up twice, both times after his name was said 3 times. We told everyone the next day. Our whole friend group agreed, no more saying his name 3 times. Not in a row. Not in one conversation. Not even by accident. It felt like a joke. A creepy, urban legend type thing. But none of us wanted to test it again. Months went by, and everything felt normal again. I started to wonder if we had just psyched ourselves out. That maybe we imagined the weirdness. Maybe Damien just had great timing and no boundaries. Then came the 3rd time. We were all hanging out at Johnny's house, on his back deck, passing around soda cans and watching the sun dip behind the trees. Fall was creeping in again. The sky had that eerie gold-pink glow, and the air smelled like damp leaves and pine needles. And, as if cursed to repeat history, someone brought up Damien. We all gave Johnny a look. The don't do it look. But Johnny was the skeptic of our group. The one who always had to push buttons. I don't buy it, he said. You guys are just messing with me. He looked us dead in the eyes and repeated Damien's name. 3 times. In the same sentence. We all shouted at him, told him to knock it off, that it wasn't funny. But he just laughed and shrugged. What? You seriously believe that stuff? We waited. 10 seconds. Then 30. Nothing happened. We relaxed a little, even laughed again. Maybe it was just a coincidence after all. But then came the knock. A slow, deliberate thump on the side gate. Not the front door. The gate, the one that led into Johnny's backyard. We all went dead silent. Johnny, half smiling, got up to check. He flicked on the backyard light. The bulb popped, burnt out instantly. No one laughed after that. He opened the gate anyway, probably still hoping it was one of our friends trying to scare us. But the yard was empty. Completely. Except for something lying right in the middle of the grass. A gray hoodie. The same one Damien always wore. Johnny didn't say anything after that. None of us did. We just went back inside. Quiet. Cold. I haven't said his name out loud since. Not even once. You probably shouldn't either. But if you do, just make sure you never say it 3 times. Not unless you want to find out what being adopted really means. I remember when nothing happened right away, and Tyler laughed, saying we were idiots for falling for such a dumb story. I was annoyed, but deep down, kind of relieved that the guy hadn't actually shown up. But I should have kept my mouth shut because just a few minutes later, I saw him. It was Noah who saw him first. We were all sitting in Noah's backyard in Maple Hollow, this quiet, woodsy town in upstate New York. He stopped talking mid-sentence, his face frozen. I turned to look, and there he was, Patrick, jumping the fence like some feral animal. No sound, no warning. Just him, staring. We all froze. None of us even breathed. He stood there on the other side of the fence, just watching us. Then, without a word, he jumped back over and vanished into the dark. Noah flipped. He actually thought we planned it. Said we were messing with him, trying to scare him. We swore we weren't. We had begged him not to say Patrick's name, and now, this. Eventually, Noah told everyone to leave. He was shaken. Quiet. I think that night broke something in him. But that wasn't the end of it. The last time I ever saw Patrick, it was worse. Much worse. That was the night I really thought I might die. It was a rainy Friday night, a few months later. I was home alone for once, something rare, since my parents were always around. They were visiting relatives in Syracuse. I invited a guy over. Someone I had been texting for a while. His name was Logan. He was good-looking, but honestly, kind of a jerk. Still, at that age, most guys were. We were hanging out in my room. The rain was light, just tapping on the window. It felt cozy. Then Logan mentioned Patrick. I instantly cringed. My whole body tensed up. He noticed and asked what was wrong. So I told him. I told him everything. He laughed. Loudly. Said he was going to call out Patrick's name, just to mess with me. I begged him not to. I wasn't playing around. I pleaded. But he didn't care. He screamed Patrick's name. 3 times. At the top of his lungs. No hesitation. And this time, it was instant. The rain slammed against the windows like a switch had been flipped. A gust of wind rocked the house. Then lightning cracked across the sky, so loud it shook the glass. I felt my chest tighten. Logan tried to laugh it off, but I could tell he was nervous too. I ran to the window, part of me hoping it was all just in my head. I looked down at the driveway, and screamed. Someone was down there. A shadow. A figure. Standing still. Looking up at my window. It was too dark to see clearly, but everything in me knew. It was Patrick. I slammed the blinds shut and bolted out of the room. I ran through the house, locking every door, my heart pounding out of control. Then I saw him again, this time in the front yard. Just standing there. Unmoving. Watching. I felt like I was going to pass out. I kept whispering, "I'm adopted," over and over. I know that makes no sense. It was just panic. Pure panic. Logan ran downstairs and found me on the kitchen floor, shaking. He helped me up, tried to calm me down. When I looked out the window again, Patrick was gone. The rain kept pouring. But I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, after Logan left, I forced myself to check the backyard. And there, in the far corner, half buried in the wet grass, was Patrick's hoodie. Stuffed inside were a few of my things. Little items I had thought were just lost. I couldn't move. Couldn't think. My parents weren't due back until the next day. I didn't call the cops. I didn't tell anyone. I figured I'd show my parents when they got back and let them deal with it. But I never had to. Because Patrick vanished. He didn't show up to school the next day. Or the day after. Or the week after that. No one saw him again. Not at school. Not in town. It was like he disappeared. My parents still live in that house. Every time I visit, I feel like I'm being watched. Some people from school later told me they'd seen Patrick hiding, just crouched behind lockers or dumpsters, watching people. Listening. Maybe that's how he always knew when his name was said out loud. Now that I'm older, I don't think Patrick was supernatural. I think he was just broken. A stalker. Maybe schizophrenic. Maybe worse. But what chills me the most isn't that he followed me. It's wondering if he still is. Where is he now? Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, Let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. We made a last-minute decision to stop by a liquor store before heading over. The snow had just started falling harder, and I wasn't thrilled about the extra stop, but we didn't want to show up empty-handed. We grabbed a 6-pack of local pale ale and a bottle of bourbon and made our way back to the car. By then, the snow was coming down thick, but honestly, we were used to it. Ethan ran back into the store to grab a tin of ZYN. He'd recently swapped smoking for that. I remember feeling a little annoyed. I was the one driving, and my car wasn't exactly made for snow-covered roads. A few minutes later, he hopped back into the car, rubbing his hands together for warmth. I pulled out of the lot and we got back on the road. The snow was blanketing everything now, soft and heavy, like a white curtain slowly dropping on the town. The drive should have been a simple 20-minute ride through the usual suburban stretch, straight roads, a few quiet neighborhoods, nothing complicated. But nothing in my life ever plays out the easy way. The storm had turned our calm evening into a stressful mess. Now, I'm the first to admit I'm not a great winter driver. My car kept slipping, and every turn felt like a gamble. After crawling uphill for a while, we turned onto a narrow street and saw something that made my stomach drop. There was a car parked in the middle of the road, hazards blinking slow and steady like a dying heartbeat. The snow swirled around it, but even through the blur, I could see both the front doors were wide open. It looked wrong. I slowed down, instinct telling me to keep going, to steer around and forget I ever saw it. But Ethan leaned forward and said, "Dude, pull over." I didn't want to. I'm not proud of it, but I've seen too much, lived through too much. I don't rush to help strangers on dark snowy roads. I told him we were late, but he gave me this serious look and said, "What if someone's hurt?" Ethan's always had this reckless streak. He's dragged me into some sketchy stuff before, but this time felt different. Against my better judgment, I pulled the car to the side and stopped. We sat there for a few seconds in silence, just staring at that car and the flickering lights cutting through the snow. Ethan asked if we were going to just sit there all night. I told him this was us checking it out. He rolled his eyes and muttered something about cowards. I really didn't want to get out of the car. Something felt off. I asked him to give it another minute. He did, but just barely. A minute later, he said, "Screw it," and stepped out. I watched as he trudged through the snow toward the car. I wanted to call him back, but the words stuck in my throat. Then something caught my eye, a dark shape shifting just at the edge of my vision. I turned, but there was nothing. Maybe it was just the storm playing tricks. Or maybe it wasn't. I squinted through the windshield, trying to see what Ethan was doing. That's when I thought I saw the car jolt. Just a little. Like something moved inside. My gut twisted. I didn't think. I slammed my hand down on the horn. The blast echoed across the empty street. Ethan jumped back, startled. He looked at me, and I waved frantically. He got the message. Without even shutting the car doors, he ran back to me. The second he slammed the door shut, I hit the gas and we sped off. I told him I thought it was a setup. He looked pissed. Based on what? He snapped. I didn't have an answer, not really. Just a feeling. But I said, I'm not dying out here over a gut feeling. He didn't say much after that. We drove the rest of the way in tense silence. He's the kind of guy who can hold a grudge over a bad restaurant order, let alone this. When we finally made it to the party, the warmth inside felt like stepping into another world. Music playing, laughter, candles glowing, it was like the storm didn't even exist. A few hours later, after the food and drinks had settled, someone turned on the TV to check the storm update. The local news came on. What I saw made my blood run cold. There had been a carjacking less than 2 hours earlier. A woman had been driving her teenage son home when they came across a car stopped in the middle of the road. Hazards on. Doors open. Just like the one we saw. They pulled over to help. And then 3 men sprang out, 2 from behind a snowbank, 1 from inside the car. They held the woman at gunpoint and took her keys. They drove off in her SUV and the decoy car, both gone before anyone could react. I just sat there, staring at the screen. Ethan turned and looked at me, his face pale. That could have been us. We told the rest of the guests what we'd seen earlier, and it instantly killed the mood in the room. But people couldn't stop asking about it. You could feel the air get heavier with every detail we shared. Even now, years later, I think about that night. About how close we came to something dark. I already didn't trust strangers much, but after that, I trust even less. Sometimes I wonder how many people I've passed by since, people who genuinely needed help because of that one trap. Because now, no matter how desperate someone looks on a snowy road, I keep driving. And I never, ever stop. The events I'm about to share happened over 30 years ago, back when I was just a kid, maybe around 10. A lot of it's fuzzy, but I'll try to recall what I can. My family was huge. And I mean huge. My dad had 8 brothers and sisters, so family gatherings always felt like reunions of strangers who already knew me. At that age, I could barely keep up with all the names and faces. Every time we had a cookout or someone's birthday, I was introduced to people I swore I'd never seen before. But they all remembered me. My grandparents on my dad's side were wealthy old money, kind of New England type. They owned a massive lake house in a little town called Silver Hollow, tucked in the woods of upstate New York. The house sat on the edge of a quiet lake and could easily fit 30 people. And during summers, that's where most of us ended up. My parents had flexible jobs, one worked in insurance, the other was a freelance writer, so they could stay out there for weeks. Same with my uncles and aunts. That house was almost never empty. I actually preferred being there over home. I got along better with some of my cousins than the kids at school. And I liked a lot of the adults too. But my favorite, by a long shot, was Uncle Joe. He was Brandon's dad. Brandon and I weren't especially close, he mostly kept to himself. But Uncle Joe? He was the kind of adult who made you feel like your thoughts mattered. He was funny, thoughtful, and kind of like the unofficial camp counselor of the family. But he was also a licensed therapist and psychiatrist. Whenever I was confused, upset, or even just curious, I talked to him. Honestly, I probably told Uncle Joe more than I ever told my own parents. He'd listen patiently and never made me feel silly for what I was feeling. That summer, I started having these horrible nightmares, really vivid and disturbing ones. I don't remember most of them now, which is probably a blessing. But they were intense. They weren't always the same, but they all left me feeling hollow. Sometimes it was about losing someone I loved. Other times it was about being left alone, completely forgotten. I'd wake up crying and not know why. There's one dream I do remember. It started like any normal day. I woke up in the dream and walked downstairs for breakfast. But the kitchen was empty. No smell of toast, no chatter. I checked my parents' room. Empty. My siblings' room. Empty. Every room. Just silence and shadows. The rest of the dream was me sitting alone on the bedroom floor, crying, thinking I'd been abandoned. After a few of those, I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want to tell my parents, they'd probably brush it off or worry too much. So I went to Uncle Joe. He didn't laugh or wave it away. He just listened carefully, jotting things down in that little brown notebook he always had with him. After I finished, he looked at me with quiet concern and said something was stirring beneath the surface of my mind. He encouraged me to reflect, whatever that meant to a 10-year-old. I remember nodding, even though I had no idea what meaningful self-reflection was. He said I should come back if it continued. And of course, it did. A few days later, I gave him an update. He sat me down out on the porch overlooking the lake and said he'd thought a lot about my dreams. What he told me still echoes in my head sometimes. He said that deep down, I was angry with my parents even if I didn't realize it. He said I was holding on to resentment. That didn't sit right with me. I loved my parents. I was a polite kid, respectful. I followed rules. I didn't even talk back. But Uncle Joe was the expert. He'd helped people for years. If he said something was true, I believed he had a reason. I asked him what to do next. Told him it scared me a little. He said fear was normal, common even in adults. And that it made sense if I didn't agree with him. That's how dreams worked, he explained. Sometimes your subconscious knows what you won't admit. And you know what? That kind of made sense. Then he told me something strange. He said that maybe I needed to express some of that hidden frustration, to let it breathe a little. He told me to try saying no more often. To push back when my parents told me what to do. Nothing extreme, just little things. See how it felt. At 10 years old, that advice sat in my chest like a pebble. I wasn't used to disobeying. But Uncle Joe made it sound like a kind of therapy. Looking back now, I wonder what his real intentions were. But at the time, I just trusted him. So that's exactly what I did. For the next 3 days after I talked to him, I acted so strangely that my parents started to worry. They said I'd been different lately, and not in a good way. They told me whatever I was going through, I needed to stop it. It crushed me to hear that, especially because they had no idea what I was going through. But I couldn't keep living like that, waking up in a cold sweat, heart racing, every single night. My 10-year-old self would have done anything to make those night terrors go away. But they didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. The images became sharper, the feelings heavier. The dreams didn't just scare me anymore, they haunted me. I couldn't take it. I ended up telling Uncle Matt again. He listened the way he always did, quietly nodding, his hands folded like he was in deep thought. Then he said there was one more thing we could try. Something different. Something stronger. I begged him to tell me. I remember grabbing the edge of his flannel sleeve and pleading like a scared little kid, because that's what I was. He looked at me for a long time before speaking. Your brain, he finally said, is older than your body. You need to let it go. I didn't understand a word of that. I thought maybe he meant meditation or something. But then he added, if you have one more nightmare, I'll show you what to do. I went to bed that night full of dread. I didn't know what he meant, but I didn't want to find out. Let my body go? What did that even mean? That night, for the first time since it all started, I woke up before the nightmare came. And not just groggy, I was wide awake. Heart thumping. Alert. And for some reason, I was too scared to move. It wasn't sleep paralysis, I could move if I wanted, but my whole body felt frozen in fear. I stared at the wall across from my bed for a full minute, just listening to the silence. Something felt off. I don't know how else to explain it. Then I heard it. A whisper right beside my ear. I swear on everything it was Uncle Matt's voice. Calm. Quiet. But unmistakable. I flipped over and screamed. He jolted back like I'd shocked him, stumbled out of the room, and slammed the door shut behind him. I sat up, sweating, heart pounding in my chest. For a second, I thought maybe I was still dreaming. But the cold sheets and the sound of my own breathing made it feel real. Instead of going back to sleep, I ran to my parents' room and blurted everything out, about the nightmares, about Uncle Matt, all of it. My dad didn't hesitate. He stormed across the hall to confront him. Uncle Matt, of course, denied everything. But my dad's not someone who backs down easy. He's a big guy, works construction. When he gets mad, you feel it. A fight broke out. My dad managed to rip the leather bag Uncle Matt always carried out of his hands. Uncle Matt grabbed what he could, stormed out, and drove off into the night. Inside that bag? Pages and pages of stuff. Dreams. Nightmares. Handwritten notes. Printouts. Weird sketches. Detailed breakdowns of techniques to trigger certain types of dreams, especially bad ones. Charts. Data. Stuff that looked like it came from some secret lab. It was horrifying. The police got involved. Later, they found even more disturbing stuff on his laptop. I won't get into the details, you can probably guess. Whatever he meant by setting my body free, it wasn't something I ever wanted to understand. I never saw him again. My parents didn't talk much about it after. Especially not around me. Sometimes I still think about how naive I was. But I was just a kid. How could I have known? Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Back in 7th grade, I didn't have a big circle of friends. The few friends I did have? Well, they were a little weird. But so was I. We shared the same strange sense of humor, and we loved the same niche stuff: video games, urban legends, and building random things out of scrap. There was Ethan, Chris, Tyler, and me. We were tight. Practically glued at the hip. At the time, I really believed we'd be friends forever. But looking back now, I can see that Chris and I had already started drifting apart from Ethan and Tyler. That's just how it goes sometimes. Anyway, that summer, Ethan invited the three of us on a week-long trip to his family's cabin up in northern Vermont. I didn't even know his family owned a cabin. Turns out, it was on this tiny island in a lake called Stillwater Ridge. I'd never heard of it before, and honestly, Ethan's family had always been a little off. They didn't talk much about where they came from, and this cabin? It kind of felt like a secret. The drive was long. Real long. And I had this awful cold the whole way: runny nose, constant sneezing. I could tell Ethan's dad was getting irritated. He was one of those hyper-clean freaks. The kind who would hand you sanitizer before shaking your hand. Every time I sniffled, I could feel him glaring at me from the driver's seat. Tyler and I were arguing about something dumb too, probably which superhero was better or something. We always got into those little spats. Eventually, we reached the ferry that would take us to the island, and that part was actually kind of fun. It felt like we were heading off to some secret place. The cabin was small but nice. Old wooden floors, the smell of cedar everywhere. It had that strange peaceful vibe where time felt slower. I remember walking in and feeling like I wasn't in the real world anymore. That sounds dramatic, I know, but it really felt that way. Like the whole island was asleep and didn't want to be disturbed. Everyone on the island seemed to know Ethan. Locals would wave at him like they'd seen him grow up there, even though he swore he hadn't visited in years. We spent our days biking around the dirt trails and through the woods. It was all pretty chill, at least at first. On the second day, I realized I couldn't find my Red Sox cap. I know it sounds silly, but I was obsessed with that hat. It was the one souvenir I'd saved up for after going to Fenway with my uncle. I swore I'd brought it back from the lakefront, but Ethan said I must have left it on the beach. I was upset and even teared up a little. Ethan's dad just told me, kind of coldly, "Don't let something that small ruin your trip." So I forced myself to shake it off. But the next day, something else happened. After biking all afternoon, I noticed one of my fountain pens was missing. I used to collect them, don't ask me why, I just thought they were cool. That pen was my favorite. I couldn't remember if I'd taken it out that day, but Chris swore he saw me writing something with it on the front porch. It hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't want to cry again in front of Ethan's dad, so I told everyone I wasn't feeling well and headed to bed early. I ended up crashing hard, probably around 8 p.m. Around 3 a.m., I woke up and couldn't fall back asleep. I just kept turning over, trying to find a comfortable spot. That's when I heard something. At first, I wasn't sure if I was dreaming. There was a whisper, so faint it was almost like wind brushing through a crack in the wall. I held my breath and listened harder. The whispering was real. It didn't sound like words I could understand. Just low murmurs. Hushed and fast, like someone telling a secret right outside my ear. I thought it was coming from the top bunk, Tyler's bed, but I wasn't sure. I don't know why I didn't speak up. Something about the sound just made me freeze. I laid there, still as stone, and eventually drifted back to sleep with the whispering still going. In the morning, I tried to forget about it. I told myself maybe I was just half awake. Maybe I imagined it. Later that afternoon, we were playing this stupid game in the backyard, something like tag but with made-up rules, when Tyler said he had to go to the bathroom. He always took forever, so we didn't think much of it. But a few minutes later, I looked back toward the cabin and stopped cold. There, in the second-story window, I saw Tyler. Just standing there. His face was pale and still. He didn't wave. He didn't blink. He just stared. I remember thinking, wait, there is no second-story bathroom. I looked over at Chris and Ethan, but they didn't see it. When I looked back at the window, Tyler was gone. That night, Ethan's dad planned to take us out to this diner in town. I said I wasn't feeling well again and stayed behind. He didn't ask questions. Just said he'd bring me back some fries. I stayed in bed that night with the covers pulled up to my chest, trying to tell myself there was nothing wrong with that house. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing I wasn't going to fall asleep. My mind wouldn't stop spinning. I kept thinking about how strange it was that Caleb had just been standing there by the cabin, silently watching us earlier. And those whispers from the woods, they were still ringing in my ears. I don't know what got into me, but I swung my legs out from under the blanket and quietly got up. Everyone else was asleep. I crept over to Caleb's bunk and crouched down by his duffel bag. When I opened it, my heart nearly stopped. Sitting right on top was my old Denver Broncos cap, the one I thought I lost on the trail. My stomach turned. I kept digging. My phone charger. A book I brought to camp. A keychain from my dad. And then, there it was. A pair of my underwear. A nail clipper my mom had packed for me. My backup toothbrush, still in the wrapper. I felt sick. Then I noticed a notebook tucked into a side pocket. I wish I could say I left it alone. I really do. But I didn't. It was a plain spiral-bound journal. Nothing on the cover. Just your basic kind of notebook. But the minute I opened it, I knew I had made a mistake. Every single page was filled with drawings. Pencil sketches, some so dark and pressed in that the paper had ripped. They weren't cartoons. These were sick, twisted images. Creatures with hollow eyes and sharp teeth. People screaming. Bodies broken in ways I didn't even think were possible. One page showed someone being dragged behind a truck. Another showed someone getting pinned to a tree with knives. Then I turned the page. And everything stopped. There were drawings of me. Not just once. Over and over. One had me standing in the woods, with black shadows behind me. Another had my face melting. But the one that's burned into my brain forever was me nailed to a wooden cross, my legs gone, and blood dripping down the page like he tried to make it real. The last few pages were just me. Over and over. One page had nothing but my name scribbled maybe 100 times. And then I reached the final one. My name was written in big bold letters at the top. Underneath, in huge letters, were 4 words. I'll do it tomorrow. My hands were shaking. I was seconds away from crying when I heard someone stir in their sleeping bag. I stuffed everything back in the bag, but I kept that one page. I ripped it out and tucked it into my pocket. The next morning, when we got back to the main house, I pulled Mr. Harper, Greg's dad, aside while the others were putting on a movie. I told him everything in a low voice, trying not to panic. He didn't believe me at first. Not until I showed him the page. I could tell from his face that he was shaken. But instead of calling anyone, he told me to put everything back exactly as I found it. I didn't want to. But he was the adult. What else was I supposed to do? As I was slipping the notebook back in Caleb's bag, Mr. Harper burst into the living room and told everyone there had been a family emergency. That we had to pack up and head out. It all happened so fast. We scrambled to load the car. I could feel Caleb watching me the whole time. His eyes felt like fire on my back. I never turned around. We took the first ferry off that island. Nobody said a word. No bathroom stops. No snacks. Nothing. Mr. Harper dropped Caleb off first. Then James. Greg lived on the same street, so he stayed behind. When we were finally alone, Mr. Harper turned to me and said he'd talked to Caleb's parents. He told me not to say anything to mine. That it would just make things worse. Greg's and Caleb's families were close. That must have been why. But when I got home, I broke. Within 10 minutes, I was crying so hard I could barely talk. My mom and dad were furious. They called the police right away. They were even angrier when they found out Mr. Harper tried to bury it. I remember sitting at the dining table, crying again, telling the officer everything. When they asked for proof, I handed over the ripped page. It was enough. They got a warrant. Found the notebook. Most of my stuff came back. All except for one thing. A pen my dad had given me, engraved with my initials. The police never found it. Caleb disappeared. His family moved away. He never came back to school. I stopped talking to Greg after that. And then, just last week, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. No message. Just one sentence written on a folded piece of paper. I remember everything. Tucked inside the envelope was the pen. I have no idea how he found where I live. And I really don't know why it took him this long to show up. Honestly, I'm thinking about breaking my lease and finding a new place. Somewhere quieter. If anyone's been through something like this, I'd love to hear your thoughts. This all just happened last week, so it's still fresh in my mind. My family's unusual. I won't go into every detail, but let's just say most of them are either obsessed with guns, hunting, or both. While other families hit the beach during summer break, mine prefers the dead of winter. But we don't do traditional vacations. Every winter, the adults pool their money and rent out a huge house in some isolated spot, usually in the woods. This year's pick? A massive cabin up in Aspen, Colorado. Though calling it a cabin isn't quite right. It looked more like an old timber lodge. Huge. Big enough for 4 families to stay without stepping on each other's toes. And then came the weird part. My family loves playing games, strange ones. A lot of them involve shooting. Paintball, target challenges, night hunts. But this one? This was different. On the second to last night of our trip, All the adults bundled up and headed out into the snowy woods for the big family tradition, a massive game of nighttime laser tag. Yeah. Laser tag. In the freezing woods. At night. I get how it sounds. Believe me, people have ghosted me over the years just because they met my family once. But every year, the winner gets bragging rights and a prize pot that isn't small. Plus, we use these industrial-grade laser tag sets that my Uncle Luke, short for Lucas, built himself. He's a retired engineer and lives for this kind of stuff. If anyone takes the game seriously, it's him. The rules were simple, every player for themselves. Last one standing wins. If more than one person's left at midnight, they split the pot. If you got tagged, you had to walk back to the fire pit just outside the lodge. When the second to last player arrived, everyone at the fire would shoot their markers into the air. That way, the final player would know they won. I had just turned 18, so this was my first year being allowed to join. And I was psyched, not even for the prize money. I just wanted in. It felt like a rite of passage. Before we started, Uncle Luke gave us the usual rundown. How the laser markers worked, where we had to wear the vests, and so on. Then he made sure everyone set a 10-minute countdown on their phones so we could all scatter before the game began. Then, without another word, he just took off, sprinting full speed into the forest like some lunatic track star. Everyone else ran in different directions. I noticed most of them ran uphill toward the rocky ridge behind the house. So I decided to go the opposite way downhill, toward the tree line. Fewer people meant better odds. Even though it was pitch black, the snow on the ground glowed just enough to see. I'm not sure how many of us were playing, at least 10 cousins, and both my parents were in the mix too. Yeah, my family's that big. I kept walking until I found a little dip in the woods, a kind of natural perch that gave me a good view back up the hill. I crouched behind a fallen log, breathing hard and trying to calm down. The cold air bit at my face, and the trees creaked under their icy coats. I stayed still for a while, just thinking. My plan was to skirt the slope sideways, then work my way uphill again and maybe flank someone. I figured most people would expect a straight climb, not a long side approach. So I moved left along the ridge for what must have been 15 minutes, just going deeper and deeper into the forest. The house was way behind me now. There was still plenty of time. Midnight was almost 2 hours away. Just as I started to climb, I heard it, a soft crunching noise, faint, but definitely there. It came from my left, the opposite direction of the lodge. I froze and ducked behind a wide tree trunk. My heart was pounding. Whoever it was, they were close. Too close. I waited, not even breathing, watching the snowline for any sign of movement. Then I saw it, barely. A faint trail of footprints in the snow, leading to a thick pine tree about 15 yards behind me. Someone was standing behind it. I was sure of it. My spine went cold. But something didn't add up. Why hadn't they tagged me? I had been completely exposed. And it was obvious they'd been following me quietly for a while. That's when I panicked. I turned and sprinted uphill, trying to get out of range. As I ran, I angled back toward the right toward the lodge, but stopped when I saw something that made my stomach twist. Another set of footprints. These started deeper in the forest and curved in a half circle, passing behind where I'd just been. It was like someone had looped around me. But that would mean they went even farther out into the woods than I had. And that didn't make sense. No one in my family would do that just for a game. Before I could think more about it, I heard something behind me. A soft thud, like someone had slipped and hit the snow. No way I was sticking around to see who it was. I booked it, this time heading straight back toward the cabin. I pulled out my phone. It was already 11:08 p.m. I had no idea how that much time had passed. I ran faster, the cold burning in my lungs, and finally found a narrow trail of fresh footprints leading back toward the house. I followed them, hoping to find anyone, still playing. As I rounded a bend near a cluster of trees, I spotted movement. My cousin Corey was walking slowly, holding his laser gun at his side. He hadn't seen me yet. But in that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was still out there. Watching us. Waiting. I crouched low behind a thick pine and pulled out my paintball marker. I hit my target dead on, and his vest started blinking red. He slammed his hand against a tree, clearly frustrated, then shook his head and kept moving toward the old cabin. I couldn't help but grin. Finally landed a solid hit. Adrenaline surged through me, and I decided to flip the script. I wanted to ambush the person who had been following me. So I sprinted forward for another minute or so, then circled back, slipping behind a crooked maple tree. I took care not to leave any tracks on the return path. It was a perfect setup. No way anyone could guess I was tucked behind that tree. I waited there, my breath fogging the cold air. Then, suddenly, my vest started blinking. What? I hadn't moved. I was hidden. And yet the red glow was flashing right on my chest. The laser had come from the direction I'd just come from. Someone had been right on my trail. I stood up, expecting the person to shut off their laser like normal. But it stayed on me, locked in. It didn't flicker. Didn't shift. It just stayed aimed right at my chest. It felt wrong. Like they weren't playing the game anymore. Like they were watching me. Curious and slightly irritated, I stepped toward the beam, wanting to see who was behind it. They didn't move or speak, just kept that laser pointed dead at me. When I got closer, I could only see their hand. The rest of their body was hidden behind a tree trunk. Then, crack! A burst of paintball shots erupted behind me, making me flinch hard. I froze. That had to be the end of the match. Someone had taken the last hit, probably Corvo. But if the game ended, who had just shot me? I turned back toward the tree with the laser. The beam was still aimed at me. And then, from behind the tree, a person stepped out. Only it wasn't someone I recognized. And they weren't alone. Another figure appeared beside them, both dressed in dark winter coats, completely silent. No gear. No vests. No eye protection. Just blank stares. And then I heard the crunching sound behind me, boots in the snow. I turned sharply and saw a man in a ski mask. He was clutching a black trash bag in one hand, and a large knife in the other. He noticed me staring and broke into a sprint. I didn't wait. I screamed and took off through the trees, throwing off my vest and goggles as I ran. My heart was pounding in my throat. I could hear all three of them charging behind me, yelling in strange, guttural voices. None of it sounded like English. The cold air burned my lungs. I pushed forward, snow flying up around my boots. I didn't dare look back. I knew they were closing in. I could feel it. Just ahead, I saw the cabin light shining through the trees. I screamed again, praying someone would hear. And then I saw Lucian. He came running through the clearing with his hunting rifle. He didn't hesitate. 3 loud shots echoed through the woods, fired straight into the air. Behind me, I heard a stumble. Then branches cracking. Then nothing. The footsteps were gone. I fell at Lucian's feet, gasping, shaking, unable to speak. My body gave up. Right there in the snow, I passed out. The next morning, I woke up sore and disoriented. My aunt explained that during the game, she had slipped and dropped her paintball gun. Later, she realized it was missing. That's probably how the strangers got their hands on one. Corvo, turns out, had eliminated 6 players before I tagged him, which explained his frustration. He was the final hit. Lucian and my dad had run out with their rifles when they heard me scream, but found nothing. They followed some tracks for a while, but but there were too many trails, some looping, others ending suddenly like someone had jumped off them. Eventually, they gave up. That day felt like a blur. The adults called the owners of the property and filed a report with the sheriff. But the strangest part came the next morning. I woke up to shouting. Lucian was screaming from the porch, aiming his gun toward the woods. I ran downstairs, confused. There, just beyond the tree line, stood a snowman. It was facing the house. In its branch-like hand was the paintball gun my aunt had lost. Lucian didn't hesitate, he raised his rifle and put 3 bullets right through the snowman's head. Then he cursed at the trees and stormed back inside. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. It's only been about a week since it happened, but I'll share more if anything else comes up. Back in college, I could never afford the big spring break trips to places like Cabo or Daytona that the sorority and frat crowd always seemed to flaunt. So for my first 3 years, I just stayed behind on campus. Honestly, I didn't mind it all that much. Quiet libraries, empty dorms, it had a peaceful vibe. But by senior year, it hit me, this was probably my last shot at having a real spring break getaway. Mexico was still out of reach for me financially. I was footing the bill myself. That's when my girlfriend, Emily, found a pretty affordable Airbnb tucked away in the mountains of northern Georgia, just outside a quiet little town called Maple Hollow. It wasn't a beach trip, but it sounded cozy and peaceful. We figured it could be a couple's retreat of sorts, so we invited her best friend, Rachel, and her boyfriend, Derek. None of us had ever vacationed together before, so the idea was exciting. But the place wasn't exactly your typical spring break spot. The house was nestled deep in the woods near a lake, far from town. There was no traffic noise, no neighbors in sight, just trees and fog and silence. The house itself was actually kind of charming. A stone fireplace, a clawfoot bathtub, a vintage record player, and even a stargazing area with reclining cots. And the hot tub? Yeah, that sealed the deal. It was about a 3-hour drive from campus. Derek offered to drive, but he had this tiny Fiat convertible, which meant Rachel and Emily had to squeeze into the back seat. He was super touchy about the car and hated when any of us made fun of it. But to be fair, the drop top was nice with the cool mountain air. We pulled up around 8 p.m. The sun had completely set, and the driveway was lit only by our headlights. The house looked way creepier at night than it had in the listing photos. Trees surrounded the property on all sides, and only one faint porch light glowed from a house down the hill. That first night was mellow. We opened a bottle of red wine, played a few board games by the fire, and laughed until the flames burned down low. We considered getting in the hot tub, but Derek was being unusually grouchy for some reason, so we just let it go. The next night, though, he was in better spirits. We convinced him to join us in the hot tub. It was in a screened-in room attached to the back of the house, kind of like a sunroom, but built for cold nights. The walls were just mesh screens and wooden beams. You could hear the wind move through the trees. We cranked up the Bluetooth speaker and started playing Never Have I Ever. A couple of drinks in, we were all feeling warm and silly. That's when it happened. A sudden, blinding flash lit up the entire room. It felt like lightning had struck right beside us. The whole hot tub glowed for a second and then total silence. I turned off the music. The 4 of us just sat there, dripping, staring at one another. Something was off. I slowly climbed out of the tub and stepped barefoot onto the cold wooden deck. I scanned the tree line, but everything beyond the porch was just black. And then, click. A strange, sharp clicking noise echoed from the woods. Then another. Then, a whistle. More clicks. More whistling. From different directions. They were getting closer, coming from the trees, maybe even behind the house. I shouted for everyone to get inside. We slammed the back door shut and bolted it, our skin still wet and steaming from the tub. We huddled in the living room, shivering, unsure what to do next. I figured it might be some local kids messing around, or maybe someone playing a twisted prank. That's why we didn't call 911 right away. And then the banging started. Someone was pounding on the front door. Rachel started crying, and Emily could barely catch her breath. I told Derek to call the police, and I grabbed the largest kitchen knife I could find. My hands were shaking. I shouted through the door that I had a gun, hoping whoever was out there would back off. The banging stopped. Derek whispered that the police were on their way, but it could take a while. Out here, we were far from town. There was no telling how long we'd be alone. Minutes passed in silence. And then, crash. One of the front windows exploded inward. Someone had hurled a huge rock right through it. We screamed. I yelled for everyone to run upstairs and lock the bedroom door. I stayed down, heart pounding, knife gripped tight, bracing for someone to crawl through the broken glass. But no one came. I slowly stepped toward the shattered window. Wind howled through the jagged opening. Caught on a shard of glass was a crumpled piece of paper taped to the rock. In thick, smeared black ink were the words, "Leave now. You aren't welcome here." The police arrived maybe 10 minutes later. They checked the woods, searched the entire property. Found nothing. We didn't wait around. We packed up and left that night. The Airbnb host refunded us without a word, but they avoided all of our questions. My girlfriend swears the host knew more than they were letting on. Maybe she's right. I guess that explains why the place was so cheap. Either way, I'm done with mountain cabins for a while. And I'm definitely done with Airbnb. I live out in Oregon, not too far from a town called Pine Hollow. Quiet place. Lots of trees, long stretches of empty highway, and thick fog that just rolls in after dark like clockwork. Back then, I was 29 and working the closing shift at a roadside diner called Hollow's Griddle. It sat just off the interstate, kind of a lonely spot, surrounded by woods and mist. We stayed open till 2 a.m., which felt ridiculously late considering how quiet the town was. But truckers and late-night drivers still trickled in now and then. There was usually someone nursing coffee or finishing a burger right up until closing. I grew up in Georgia before I moved out here. People there? Friendly. Real friendly. You could walk into a store and end up knowing someone's entire life story before you left. Up here, though, it's different. Folks are polite, but reserved. Not cold, just quiet. The air itself feels quieter. Heavier, maybe. So that night, it was just me and our night cook, Jerry. It was almost 2, maybe 1:50 a.m., when the front bell chimed and a man walked in. I noticed him right away because he looked, well, kind of out of place. He was on the heavy side, wore jeans pulled up too high, and a brown corduroy jacket. He had a thick brown mustache and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. The whole time, he had this odd, tight-lipped smile like he was trying too hard. I greeted him and asked if he wanted to sit at the counter or a booth. He said booth, still smiling, and I handed him a menu while letting him know the kitchen would close in 10 minutes. He barely glanced at the menu before saying, "Just coffee. And some French toast if that's all right." Then he told me his name was Nolan. The order was simple, thankfully. Jerry wasn't thrilled about it, but he got to work without too much of a fuss. When I returned to the floor, Nolan waved me over and started chatting, unusual for this hour and place. He asked if I was local, then started griping about the potholes on Route 7. I gave him a polite chuckle and told him it was the winter ice that did it. Nothing special, just surface-level talk. But he kept pressing, asked what part of town I lived in. I stayed vague. I never tell strangers where I live. He told me he'd just moved to Pine Hollow from out east. Said it was peaceful. He smiled when he said it, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I started to wonder if he was trying to flirt. Wouldn't be the first time. Working in diners, you build up a filter for weird energy. Eventually, Jerry brought the plate out himself and slid it onto the counter. I handed it to Nolan and began my usual end-of-night routine, wiping tables, checking the register, stacking chairs. I kept my distance from Nolan. He was still sipping coffee, eating slow, and my energy was running on fumes. By the time he finished, I dropped the check without being asked, hoping it would gently hint that we were closing up. He paid with a card, nodded, and walked out into the misty night. Jerry was locking up, so after clearing Nolan's booth and grabbing my coat, I said goodnight and headed to my car. There were 3 cars in the lot, mine, Jerry's, and a third one parked closer to the road. It was an older silver sedan, maybe a 2005 Toyota or something like it. The kind of car that blends in. I couldn't see inside. Either the windows were tinted, or it was just that dark out. No movement. No light. I figured maybe it was Nolan's. I didn't think much of it until I started my drive home. The route back to my apartment takes about 20 minutes through winding forest roads. Barely any streetlights. Just darkness and the occasional flicker of high beams in your rear view. About 5 minutes into the drive, I heard the soft ding from my dashboard, followed by the tire pressure warning. I looked down. My rear passenger side tire was dropping fast. 20 psi, then 10. Then the whole car began to tremble, not just the steering wheel, but everything. I was still a good stretch from home, surrounded by nothing but trees. I didn't know how to change a tire. I'd never even called roadside assistance before. I started to panic a little, heart pounding louder than the music playing from the radio. I had no choice. I eased the car onto the gravel shoulder, right where the woods pressed close to the road. There wasn't another vehicle in sight. And that's when I realized I hadn't seen Nolan's car drive past me. I pulled over and jumped out quickly to check the tire. Sure enough, it was completely flat. Just then, as if someone flipped a switch, a pair of headlights lit up the roadside ahead. A car was approaching slowly. It came to a stop about 10 feet behind me. I rushed back inside my car and locked the doors. My heart was pounding. I had no idea what to do next. Then came a soft knock at my window. I looked up, and there he was. The man from the diner. Nolan. He was smiling, casually waving at me like this was some kind of cheerful coincidence. He was wearing gloves now. For privacy, let's just say my name is Katie. Nolan leaned in close to the glass and said with a laugh, "Katie? Is that you? Everything okay?" That pit formed in my stomach. That sharp, sick feeling you get when something's terribly wrong. I knew it. He did this. I cracked the window barely 2 inches. Just enough to speak. He tilted his head and asked if I needed help. I told him I had a flat tire. "Oh really?" he said, playing dumb. "Which one?" "Back passenger," I answered. He nodded and walked around to check. While he was out of sight, I grabbed my phone and quietly dialed 911. I placed the phone on my lap, speaker on low. I didn't want him to hear the operator's voice. He came back around, still wearing that unsettling smile. "I can help you change it," he offered. "No big deal." "I appreciate it," I said, "but my boyfriend's on his way to help." I made sure to say that loud enough for the operator to hear, too. Nolan's smile twitched, just a bit. Less friendly. Less relaxed. Then he walked away from the car again. I seized the moment. Barely above a whisper, I told the 911 operator, "This man slashed my tire. He's trying to get me out of the car." She asked for my location. I fumbled with my phone, opened the map, and gave her the name of the road I'd pulled off on. Suddenly, crash. The driver's side window shattered beside me. Glass sprayed into my lap as I screamed. I shouted as loud as I could, "I'm on the phone with the police." He didn't flinch. He looked straight at the phone. Then, without a word, he reached into the car. I thought he was going to grab me or try to choke me. Instead, he snatched the phone from my lap and hurled it toward the highway. Then he ran. I saw him get into his car and peel away. His tires squealed as he made a sharp turn, vanishing into the dark. I wanted to run after my phone, but it was pitch black out there, and I didn't have a flashlight. My headlights lit up just a small patch of road. Beyond that was just night and trees. So I stayed inside the car. I locked the doors. And I prayed. I'm incredibly grateful I gave my location to the operator in time. A few minutes later, I heard it, the distant wail of sirens. And I started to cry. Red and blue lights flashed as a cruiser pulled off the highway and onto my road. I jumped out and waved my arms like crazy. 2 more units showed up soon after. One of the officers found what was left of my phone. It was totally smashed. I described Nolan to them, his clothes, his voice, his car. I told them which way he went. One of the cops drove off in that direction while another called it in over the radio. Honestly, they were some of the kindest officers I'd ever met. One of them changed my tire. Another drove behind me all the way home to make sure I got there safely. Before he left, the lead officer told me they'd check the diner's surveillance footage and keep me updated. About a week later, I got a call from that same officer. He said the investigation was still open and that they had some video footage, but nothing conclusive yet. That was the last I ever heard. I don't think they caught him. I never went back to that job at the diner. I couldn't risk seeing that man again, not ever. Hey everyone. I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. This happened just last October, and I still get chills every time I think about it. My name's Ben, and I was 15 at the time. I had a part-time job at a local fall fair in a small upstate town called Pine Hollow, New York. The place wasn't big, just a seasonal amusement fair with hayrides, a haunted barn, and a few food stands. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. This happened on one of the last weekends before the fair closed for the winter. It was a cool, crisp Sunday, orange leaves crunching under your feet and the air sharp with that early autumn bite. I had been on shift for a little over 5 hours, manning the ring toss booth. Everything felt normal, until it didn't. I looked down at my watch. 4:55 p.m. 5 more minutes, and I was free. My feet were sore, my back was stiff, and all I could think about was getting home, throwing on sweats, and eating something warm. But then I saw him. A man started walking toward me from behind the funnel cake stand. He had wild, unkempt hair and a patchy beard. His gray t-shirt was stained and wrinkled, and his black sweatpants were full of holes like they'd been through something. I remember thinking, just one more person. One more, and then I'm done. Can I help you? I asked, trying to keep it professional. He didn't answer at first. He kept turning his head, like he thought someone was following him. His eyes were wide and unfocused, like he was listening to something only he could hear. The longer he stood there, silent and twitchy, the more uneasy I felt. "Sir?" I repeated, this time a bit firmer. He finally spoke, but his voice was barely above a whisper. Where are your bathrooms?" His words sent a weird chill through me. I pointed up the hill. Right past the haunted barn. To the right. He nodded, jerky and slow, and turned to walk. But he didn't just walk away. He kept looking back. Over and over. His eyes locked on me each time like he was memorizing my face. My coworker Devin came over just then to cover the booth. Without saying much, I grabbed my hoodie and backpack and speedwalked to the employee shed to clock out. I changed out of my work vest, threw my stuff in my bag, and headed toward the lot. I sat down on the old bench near the parking area and waited for Jordan. He was 17 and usually gave me rides home. It felt like he took forever to show up, but when he finally pulled in, I jumped into his pickup like it was my safe zone. We decided to grab burgers at this diner we liked before heading home. It was a typical retro spot: neon signs, checkered floors, and a jukebox that rarely worked. We ordered cheeseburgers and fries, and I was just starting to relax when I felt it, that same uneasy feeling from earlier. I looked up, and my stomach dropped. There he was. The same man. Sitting 2 booths over, staring at me. Not eating. Not even pretending to be doing something else. Just staring. I leaned in and whispered to Jordan, "Dude, that's him. The guy from the park." He looked and then shrugged. "It's probably just a weird coincidence, Ben. Don't freak yourself out." I nodded, but I didn't feel any better. We left the diner around 7 and started the 35-minute drive home. It was dark now, and the fall fog had started to roll in. At the first red light, I glanced to my right, and there it was again. That same man. Sitting in a beat-up white Honda. In the next lane. Staring. At me. Jordan, it's him again. This time, Jordan didn't shrug. He looked concerned. We didn't say much after that. When we got to our neighborhood, we circled the block a few times just to make sure we weren't being followed. Everything seemed clear, so Jordan dropped me off. The house was quiet. My mom and little sister were out shopping, and my dad was out of state on business. I locked every door, double-checked the windows, and crawled into bed with a hoodie on, trying to block it all out. That's when I heard it. A sound. A light tapping on my bedroom window. I didn't want to look. I really didn't. But I did. Standing on the front lawn was him. Just standing there. Smiling up at me. I backed away, heart pounding so loud I thought he'd hear it. I called 911 immediately. The police arrived within minutes. But by the time they got there, the man was gone. No footprints. No car. Nothing. I quit the job right after the fair shut down for winter. I haven't seen that man again since. But sometimes, I still check the lawn before bed, just in case. Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. I was working the late shift at a small 24-hour diner off Route 27 in upstate New York. I'd been there almost a year. That night, it was coming down hard, cold rain slamming against the windows, turning the parking lot into a mirror of streetlights and storm clouds. Stormy nights like that usually meant fewer customers. Most folks didn't want to be out on those slick country roads. I figured it'd be a slow one. And for a while, it was. My shift ended at midnight. Around 11:30, a man and a much younger woman walked in. He looked about 40, maybe more. She couldn't have been older than 22. The moment they stepped inside, both their eyes landed on me. I gave them a polite smile and walked over to greet them. "Just two?" I asked. They nodded, so I led them to a booth near the window. They took their time with the menu, whispering to each other across the table. When they finally ordered, the man struck up a conversation with me. I didn't mind, I've always been chatty, which is why the hospitality business suited me. We had the usual small talk. But what stood out was how quiet the girl was. She hardly said a word. He did all the talking, so I naturally focused on him. I can't remember everything we talked about, but I do remember one thing that chilled me later. He asked, "Do you live alone?" At the time, it didn't set off any alarms. I answered honestly, told him I lived about 10 minutes north, in a sleepy area with just a few rental homes. Quiet. Boring. Looking back, I realize how strange that question was. But in that moment, him sitting across from a young woman made him seem less threatening somehow. You drop your guard around couples. That's just how the mind works. I joked about being stuck in that diner forever, then walked off to help close up. They stayed for a while. Eventually, they paid and left. About an hour later, we were locking up. I said goodnight to my coworkers and hurried to my car to avoid getting soaked. The rain hadn't let up one bit. I drove carefully, wipers on full speed, tires sliding a little on the slick backroads. Once I got home, I ran from my car to the front porch and let myself in. I didn't notice right away that the other tenants' cars weren't there. I rented the middle unit in a 3-story house. Each floor was its own apartment. There was a shared side entrance with a stairway to all 3 units, but mine had a private door in the front, which I usually used. I set my keys and bagged down on the kitchen counter. That's when I heard it, a pounding at the front door. Not a knock. A frantic, almost desperate pounding. It was nearly 1 a.m. The only people I could think of were the neighbors upstairs or downstairs. I always kept both the storm door and the main door locked, so I opened the inner door to look. Standing behind the storm door was a girl. Soaked to the bone. Hood up. Hair stuck to her cheeks. She was wearing a gray sweater, and her face was partly hidden in shadow. She pleaded with me, begged me to let her in and use a phone. Naturally, I didn't open the door right away. I asked her if she was lost. She said some man had been following her for blocks and she didn't know where else to go. She looked terrified, but something about her seemed familiar. I asked who the man was and where he'd gone. She turned and looked down the road. "I don't know," she said softly. She tried opening the storm door herself. It rattled against the latch. That's when it hit me. She looked just like the girl from the diner. I asked her straight out, "Weren't you at the diner earlier tonight?" She didn't answer. Maybe she didn't hear me. Maybe she didn't want to. Then she turned again and started yelling, "There he is! There he is!" I looked past her, down the road. A tall man in a dark coat was walking slowly toward the house. His figure was heavy and deliberate, steps crunching wet gravel. And I knew, without a doubt, it was him. The man from the diner. She must have seen the recognition in my eyes, because she suddenly turned toward him and screamed, "Go!" He broke into a run. I slammed the inner door and locked it, heart hammering in my chest. I waited, expecting more pounding, glass breaking, something. But there was nothing. Just the sound of the rain. I backed away from the door and ran toward the side stairwell. I banged on the upstairs neighbor's door. No answer. I tried downstairs. Same thing. I looked out the hallway window, no cars. They weren't home. I was completely alone. I went back into my apartment and locked the stairwell door behind me. My thoughts were racing. It all started to click, the weird question about living alone, the silent girl, the way they watched me. It had been a setup. I sat down on the couch, gripping the edges, trying to slow my breathing. The only sounds were the wind and rain. I considered calling the police but didn't move. After a while, I got up to brush my teeth. I was in the bathroom when I heard it again, a knock. I paused. There it was again. A slow, deliberate knock. It was coming from the stairway door. I stepped into the hall and approached it. "Who is it?" I called. No answer. Just another knock. I called out the names of the upstairs and downstairs tenants. Still no response. "If you don't say who you are, I'm calling the police," I shouted. Silence. Then another knock. My voice cracked as I screamed, "What do you want?" A pause. Then a voice raspy, close, said, "Your blood on me." I turned and bolted to my bedroom, slammed the door, and locked it. I grabbed my phone and called 911. While waiting for the police, I hid in the closet, whispering my address to the dispatcher. Every gust of wind, every creak from the old house, made me jump. It felt like hours, but it was only 10 minutes before I heard officers calling out. I let them in. They did a full check: yard, porch, street. Nothing. But they saw how shaken I was and told me I should find somewhere else to stay for a few nights. So I packed a bag and headed to my parents' place. The next day, I returned to the house. My neighbor from upstairs had just gotten home and met me at the stairwell. He pointed at my stairway door and said, "What's this?" Written across the door in thick black marker were the words, "Thanks for the service, Beth." My stomach dropped. I hadn't told them my name. I couldn't stay there after that. I stayed with my parents for a few weeks while I found a new place. I moved just a few blocks away the next month. Better safe than sorry. Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. My mom usually took my older brother and me trick-or-treating around our neighborhood in Silver Pines, Ohio. But that Halloween, she dropped me off at my friend Logan's house instead. Logan and our other buddy Tyler were going to go out with me that year. Tyler and Logan were both a grade ahead of me. We'd all become friends just messing around outside after school, riding bikes, and playing tag until the streetlights came on. They lived just a few blocks over, near the woods. Logan's home life was different. He had an older sister, Mara, who was maybe 20, way older than us. She always seemed to be the one watching him. His house always smelled like cats, and Mara never talked to me. She'd just glance at me like I was in the way. There were always different guys hanging around, too. It made me uncomfortable, but I never said anything. I never met Logan's dad. His mom was always working out of town, whatever that meant. I think I only saw her once or twice. Anyway, that Halloween, my mom assumed Logan's mom or sister would go with us. She waved goodbye and drove off. Inside, Tyler was already there, and we were all geared up with pillowcases, ready to collect enough candy to last until Christmas. That's when I realized no adult was coming with us. No mom, no sister, no one. I was a little nervous, but Tyler acted like it was no big deal. He said we were old enough, and honestly, there was something thrilling about the freedom. I knew deep down my mom wouldn't have been okay with it. We started hitting houses around 5 o'clock. It was a Friday, and since there was no school the next day, our plan was to go until our bags were bursting. People kept asking if we were alone, but Tyler had this canned answer: "My mom's just ahead with my sister." Everyone believed it. After a couple of hours, we went back to Logan's place. He popped a few frozen pizzas in the oven, and we stuffed our faces while watching Halloween specials on TV. For a moment, I was jealous of how little his parents seemed to care about what he did. But looking back now, I realize how lucky I was to grow up with parents who actually gave a damn. Tyler got picked up later by his mom. Logan and I weren't ready to call it quits, so we went out for a second round. It was past 8 now, and the streets were much quieter. Only a few porch lights were still on. We started heading into streets we hadn't visited yet, blocks further away from Logan's house. Most houses didn't answer anymore, and the ones that did commented on how late it was or asked where our parents were. That's when we noticed a man walking slowly behind us, pushing a stroller. He didn't seem creepy at first, probably just a dad out with his baby. We kept going door to door, but he got closer with each stop. After a while, we could hear him humming a soft tune under his breath. He eventually caught up to us. "Hey, kids," he said with a warm smile. "How's the candy haul?" "Good," we both answered automatically. He nodded. "I'm heading back home now. Didn't get many trick-or-treaters tonight. You boys want the rest of my candy?" Logan and I exchanged a look, like we just hit a mini jackpot. Logan asked what kind of candy, and the man said, "All sorts. Got some full-size ones left, too. Just didn't get to give them out since I took my daughter for a stroll instead." There was a bag hanging from the stroller handle, and yeah, it looked like there was candy inside. The stroller was covered with one of those fold-down canopies, so we couldn't see the baby. "She's asleep," he added. "Didn't want to wake her. But my house is right up ahead." He started walking faster, and we followed. As we walked, he asked where we lived, what school we went to, basic stuff. Logan answered most of the questions. Even though he was only a year older, I felt like he should take the lead. Every few steps, the man would bend down and coo softly to the stroller, like he was calming the baby. Then he'd look back at us and smile again. Eventually, we reached his house. He pushed the stroller up the walkway and unlocked the door. The house was dark inside. He rolled the stroller in and held the door open. "You can come in. I'll grab the candy bags," he said. Logan walked in first, and I hesitated before following. The second I stepped into the house, I got a bad feeling. I asked if we could leave the door open, and after a pause, he said, "Sure." He wheeled the stroller into the living room and said he'd be right back. But instead of heading down a hallway or into the kitchen, he left the stroller in the middle of the room and disappeared into a back corner. Something felt wrong. I nudged Logan and whispered, "Why would he leave the candy somewhere else?" Logan didn't answer. He just slowly walked over to the stroller. He hesitated, then lifted the canopy. His face went pale. He rushed back and whispered, "We have to go." Then he bolted. I followed, but the pillowcase of candy made it hard to run. My heart was pounding, and I still didn't fully understand what had happened. As we made it to the sidewalk, a woman's voice yelled, "Excuse me." We turned to see one of the neighbors rushing toward us. "Do you boys know that man?" she asked, alarmed. Logan blurted out, "He offered us candy, said he had a baby with him, but the stroller, it had a fake baby inside." I remember the chill that ran through me. The way Logan said fake baby, I'll never forget it. The woman's face changed instantly. "That man doesn't have a child," she said firmly. "I saw him walking with you. Get in, I'll drive you both home." It probably wasn't the best idea to get into another stranger's car, but she seemed genuinely concerned. She dropped Logan off first, then drove me home. She even came to the door to explain everything to my mom. My mom was in shock. After I told her the whole story, she sent me to my room. I could hear her and my dad talking in tense whispers. I know they called the police, but they never told me what happened after that. Maybe they didn't want to scare me any more than I already was. I wasn't allowed to go to Logan's house anymore. I think my mom had a long talk with his mom, though I never heard what was said. Logan and I still saw each other at school sometimes. We were polite, but things were never the same after that night. It was Halloween night, 2016. My folks asked me to stay home and hand out candy to the kids that evening. My mom had gone overboard again. She bought so many bags from Walmart, you'd think she was prepping for a school carnival. I knew what was going to happen too. Barely any kids would show, and I'd be the one left inhaling peanut butter cups for the next 2 weeks, while trying to lose 10 pounds. Typical mom. Our house was in a sleepy cul-de-sac on the edge of Pine Hollow, Vermont. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else, or at least pretended to. Not many trick-or-treaters came down our way. Still, we had a few die-hard neighborhood kids who made a beeline for our place every Halloween. They knew Mom handed out the good stuff. That year, Halloween landed on a Monday. I was in college and happened to have Mondays and Wednesdays off that semester. Lucky me. I hit the gym earlier in the day and spent a good chunk of the afternoon working on a psych paper. It was around 4 p.m. when I first heard the faint sounds of kids laughing outside, usually the signal that trick-or-treating had begun. I think the doorbell rang sometime between 4:15 and 5. The evening rolled along like you'd expect. Nothing remarkable. A dozen or so kids rang the bell. Our terrier, Tito, barked himself hoarse every single time, and I played the polite candy giver while daydreaming about being anywhere else. From 4 to 8 p.m., maybe 15 kids showed up. That cul-de-sac was easy to miss, especially for families just cruising through the neighborhood. Honestly, it felt like people avoided it on purpose. Monday nights weren't exactly festive either. Everything quieted down earlier than usual. By 8:30, I'd made solid progress on my paper, scarfed down leftover chili from Mom, and retreated to my room upstairs to catch up on Game of Thrones. I was 2 episodes deep when I heard the doorbell again. Tito went berserk, of course. I glanced at the clock, 9:30 p.m. Way too late for trick-or-treaters. I paused the show and headed downstairs, already annoyed. Through the glass of our storm door stood a tall man in a full clown costume. He wore a grotesque mask, one of those exaggerated, painted grins with hollow eyes. The kind you don't forget. He was alone. He waved slowly and then pointed at the brown sack he was holding. It looked empty. I didn't open the storm door. I just said, "Sorry, we're out of candy," loud enough to be heard through the glass, then shut the inner door and locked it. Immediately, I regretted even answering. I had assumed naively that maybe it was a late working parent trying to squeeze in a last-minute round with their kid. But this guy? No kid. No stroller. Nothing but that freaky mask and that bag. He wasn't a teenager either. His build was massive, broad shoulders, tall frame, and the clown suit somehow made him even more imposing. I was thankful I hadn't brought the candy bowl to the door. At least he didn't catch me in a lie. I stayed by the door for a few seconds, listening. I expected to hear footsteps on the gravel. Nothing. Then the doorbell rang again. Tito erupted. Now, let me tell you, Tito's a rat terrier. All bark, no bite. He's got the energy of a wind-up toy and the courage of a marshmallow. I scooped him up, flipped off the porch lights, and hustled upstairs. I figured if it looked like we'd shut down for the night, maybe he'd leave. I dropped Tito in my room and closed the door so he wouldn't keep barking. Then I stood at the top of the stairs and listened. That's when I heard a sharp metallic snap. Something, or someone, had just forced the storm door open. Then came slow, deliberate knocks on the main door, followed by the sound of the doorknob turning. Rattling. I froze. Panic sank in like ice water. I rushed back to my room and locked the door. My fingers shook as I pulled up our family group chat and sent a message. Some guy dressed as a clown is trying to get in. He won't leave. Call me. No one answered. I thought about texting my friends to see if one of them was pulling a prank, but all my close buddies were around 5 feet 8 inches, no way this guy was one of them. I tried to shake it off and returned to my episode. Maybe it was just some weirdo trying to scare people. Halloween and all. But a few minutes later, the doorbell rang again. At this point, I felt like I was trapped in some B-list horror movie. I whispered at Tito to quiet down. I kept the blinds closed, I didn't want that psycho knowing where in the house I was. I tried calling my dad. No answer. Then I called my brother. He picked up, sounding out of breath and distracted. He was with a girl, obviously. I told him to check the group chat. There's a dude dressed like a clown outside the house, I whispered. He won't leave. He paused. It's probably just a prank. Chill. Lock the doors and ignore it. And then he hung up. Great. I wanted to believe him. I did. So I waited. And after a few tense minutes, nothing. No more ringing. I started to relax. Told myself it was over. I laid back down and turned off the TV, letting the silence of the house wrap around me like a blanket. Slowly, I drifted off. I don't think I was asleep for long. Tito's low growl brought me back. He wasn't barking like before, he was growling. A quiet, uncertain sound. The kind of noise dogs make when they're not sure if they should be scared yet. I whispered, "Tito, it's okay," and he stopped. But he kept staring at the window. I listened. There was a sound. A faint tap-tap, like something brushing the glass. Something rubbing against it. The thing is, my room was on the second floor. No tree branches near the window. No ledge outside. I got up and peeked through the blind. And there he was. That clown. That horrific, smiling mask was inches from my face. On the other side of the glass. Staring right at me. I screamed. He tilted his head, slowly, like something out of a nightmare. His eyes locked on mine. I don't even remember if Tito barked or ran. I just know I grabbed my phone, bolted out of the room, and locked myself in my parents' bedroom. I dialed 911 with shaking hands. My voice cracked as I explained the situation. I kept begging the dispatcher to hurry. I couldn't stop repeating it. The operator stayed calm. Told me help was on the way. Those 10 minutes waiting felt like a lifetime. When the police arrived, I ran downstairs to meet them. They swept the outside of the house and found two things. 1, the storm door's latch had been broken, just like I thought. 2, my dad's ladder was leaning up against the siding, right beneath my bedroom window. He'd gone into our shed and pulled it out. Climbed up there just to watch me sleep. That was the last straw. I didn't even grab a change of clothes. I took Tito, hopped in my car, and drove straight to my friend Adam's place across town. I didn't sleep that night. And I haven't answered the door on Halloween ever since. Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. To this day, I still can't say for sure if what happened was some twisted Halloween prank, or if something far more dangerous was about to unfold under the perfect cover of the holiday. It was the Saturday before Halloween, what everyone calls Halloweekend. Halloween fell on a Tuesday that year, so Saturday was the big night for parties. My friends and I were still scrambling to make plans. Every major event was sold out or already packed. Ideally, we wanted to crash a house party. We'd all put together ridiculous, funny costumes and didn't want to waste them. My friend Megan posted on her Instagram and Snapchat stories asking if anyone had party leads. Honestly, I'd never do something like that myself. It felt kind of desperate, but I was secretly relieved that she had the guts to do it. Surprisingly, someone actually responded to her. A few minutes later, she dropped a screenshot into our group chat. It had a house address, a start time, and some house rules. Stuff like, parties inside only, no backyard access, and bring your own booze. It also said guys must bring at least one girl. Typical. But the message came from someone we vaguely knew, Tyler, one of those guys who seemed to know everybody in our local scene. Apparently, a bunch of mutuals were already planning to be there. The house was just one town over in a place called Pine Hollow, not far at all. Since our friend Lauren had an open place that night, we all pre-gamed at her place for about an hour. Laughter, makeup chaos, last-minute costume adjustments. We waited until the guys confirmed they were on their way too. Then we grabbed an Uber. Between the four of us, me, Megan, Lauren, and Ashley, we had enough drinks to stock a mini fridge. Everything from hard seltzers to mini vodka shooters. I'm pretty sure the Uber driver was counting the minutes until we got out. The house itself was huge, with a wide front lawn full of parked cars. The kind of place you'd expect to see in a real estate ad. We were 4 girls walking in together, so I figured whoever was hosting this party would be happy to have us. Oddly, we didn't hear any music at first. It wasn't until we reached the front porch that we started hearing bass thudding faintly through the walls. I opened the door and stepped into what looked like a mix between a living room and an open kitchen. The place was dimly lit with orange Halloween string lights zigzagging across the ceiling. It gave off that low-key haunted house vibe, perfect for the occasion. The house was decently crowded, but none of us recognized a single face. Megan texted Tyler to see if he was there yet. While we waited, a man walked up to us. He looked to be in his mid-50s. Friendly enough. He introduced himself as Greg, said he was the father of the guy throwing the party, Luke. I asked where Luke was, curious about the host, and Greg just smiled and said, "Oh, he's around here somewhere. You'll find him." Then he offered to put our drinks in one of the kitchen coolers. There were 3 giant ones already filled with ice and cans of beer. We tossed in some of our drinks. Greg was way too involved for a dad at a college-age house party. He wasn't just hanging around, he was mingling with almost everyone. Mostly girls. He seemed like he'd had a few drinks himself, too. Something about his energy made me uneasy. We decided to play some beer pong at one of the folding tables. A couple of random guys challenged us, and we went along with it. Megan got a text saying Tyler and his friends were finally on their way. That gave me a weird sense of relief. Suddenly, Greg shouted out mine and Megan's names from the kitchen. "Shots," he yelled. Ashley and Lauren looked a little annoyed that he left them out, so I asked if they could join too. He waved his hand and shouted, yeah, bring everyone." So we gathered around the counter, and he poured us all shots of tequila. No lime. No salt. Just straight burn. I gagged and coughed, already feeling tipsy. It was weird how hyped this guy was for his son's party. There was something off. Like he was trying too hard. Like he wanted to be remembered. Then he asked, "What's your poison?" I didn't answer right away, but the others threw out their favorite drinks. Next thing we knew, Greg was behind the counter mixing cocktails like a bartender on speed. While he did that, we headed back to our beer pong game. I plugged my phone into the wall. My battery was at 50% and dying fast, but the outlet didn't seem to be working. No charging symbol, no buzz. Just dead silence. I didn't trust the other outlets around the house, especially with so many strangers. So I figured I'd just save what battery I had left. Greg came back over with drinks for all 4 of us. Red Solo cups, of course. He handed me a vodka soda. I sipped slowly, pacing myself. I already felt lightheaded. After we lost the game, I went back to check my phone again, still no charge. Same battery level. I felt a weird twinge in my stomach. Just brushed it off. Soon after, Tyler and the other guy showed up. That's when everything really started to blur. I mean really blur. One moment I remember laughing with our friend Danny at the bonfire, the next, I was out cold. The next thing I recall was my friends gently waking me up inside a car parked outside my house in Maple Ridge, a quiet little town in Oregon. I felt strange. Not just tired, but foggy. My vision was hazy, and my head spun in a way I'd never experienced before. I was in the backseat of my friend Trevor's car. He and Ryan were in the front. Trevor walked me up to my front door and helped me inside. Then they left. The house was dark. My parents were asleep upstairs. I remember thinking I must have just had too much to drink, but something about this wooziness didn't feel like alcohol. It was deeper, heavier, wrong. I went straight to bed, collapsed onto my mattress without changing. I checked my phone. That's when I saw a string of messages from an unknown number. I didn't recognize it, but somehow, the conversation had started with me texting, "Hey, it's Maddie." The reply came, "This is John." Followed by, "You looked so cute tonight." The timestamp? Still during the party. Then there was a 2-hour silence. After that, another message popped up. Where did my favorite girls go? My stomach turned. Had I really given that guy my number? I didn't even remember talking to him for more than a second. I must have been far more out of it than I thought. Still, I put the phone down and tried to sleep. But the next morning, it got worse. New messages had come in after I'd passed out. I scrolled through them, heart racing. 2:12 a.m., where are you? 2:14 a.m., I'm coming to your place. You left something here. 2:27 a.m., I'm outside. Can you come to the door? 2:32 a.m., hello? Are you awake? He'd even called 3 times. I immediately texted my friends the screenshots. That's when things started coming back to them. John had been all over me toward the end of the night, they said. I was barely coherent, just standing there like a shell. That's when they got worried and pulled me away. We left just as 2 squad cars rolled up, probably a noise complaint. But then someone mentioned something even weirder. There hadn't been any furniture in the house. Just people, drinks, and a few folding tables for beer pong. It had been completely empty otherwise. That's when Trevor did a little digging. Somehow, he traced the number. It was a VoIP number, meaning it wasn't a regular phone. It was fake. He also told me something that made my skin crawl. With just your number, he said, he could have found your address. My stomach sank. When I asked if anyone had actually met the guy's so-called son, the one he claimed was hosting the party, everybody shook their heads. Not one person. Then Shauna said something that made everything click. What if he roofied you? It made too much sense. I'd never felt like that before. Not from drinking. We didn't wait. All 5 of us drove straight to the nearest police station in Hillsborough and reported everything, screenshots, our story, everything we had. The officer at the front desk gave us a strange look when we mentioned the party. Was this about the vacant house on Birch Lane, he asked. Vacant? He explained there had been a complaint from a neighbor about a party happening in a house that had been empty for months. Foreclosed. That's when we all looked at each other, wide-eyed. They took us to speak with a detective. He took down the fake number and said they'd try to get a warrant and trace it. We gave them everything. Afterward, we left, shaken but hoping something would come of it. I blocked the number. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had almost happened. Or maybe, had already happened. Weeks passed. We heard nothing. No arrests. No calls. Nothing. It eats at me to think some guy orchestrated a party in a vacant home, used a fake number, possibly drugged me, and who knows who else, just to get access to girls. Lied about his son. Disappeared into the night. And the scariest part? We never saw his real name. We were never shown photos to identify anyone. We never got a follow-up. It's been a month now. He's still out there. And if you're reading this and you've been in a similar situation, please be careful. Some people will do anything to get close to you. If anything changes, I'll update. And I truly hope something does. Before we dive into tonight's stories, a quick word from our sponsor, Fume. Fume is a top-rated flavored air device that's becoming one of the most popular alternatives to smoking and vaping. It's not a vape, and it's not addictive. There's no nicotine, no vapor, and no charging needed. Fume pulls natural, non-toxic flavors straight to your mouth. It's compact, easy to use, and pretty fun to fidget with, too perfect for easing anxiety or just keeping your hands busy. I've been using Fume for a while now, and honestly, it's changed how I manage stress. My favorite part? You don't need to plug anything in. It just works simple, clean, and satisfying. Over 300,000 people have made the switch. If you're looking to kick a habit or just want something to keep in your hand instead of a cigarette, check it out. And right now, when you use my code NIGHTMARE, you'll get a free topper, a soft, chewable mouthpiece that adds comfort and calm to every inhale. Go to tryfume.com, that's try-f-u-m.com, and use code NIGHTMARE, or scan the QR code on your screen to claim your free topper when you order your journey pack. Okay, here's a story that still makes my skin crawl, even after all these years. Back in college, I wasn't exactly Mr. Popular. I didn't go to frat parties, I didn't have a girlfriend, and I wasn't even all that social. My grades were just okay, and I mostly kept to myself. I was one of those kids who stayed in on weekends and didn't mind being alone. But I'm not bitter about it. I found the right person later in life, a woman who stuck with me through thick and thin. Now, I live in a quiet neighborhood in northern Oregon with her and our 2 cats, Blue and Raz. I'm even planning to propose soon. Still, back then, I wanted to have fun. Just because I wasn't a party animal didn't mean I didn't get bored. My 2 closest friends, Bryson and Ian, felt the same way. We weren't in any clubs, we didn't play sports, and we weren't in frats. But we made the most of what we had. Most weekends were spent hanging around Bryson's place, watching movies and cracking jokes. But every now and then, we got wind of a party. Most of the ones we went to weren't school-sponsored or frat-related, they were off-campus, random get-togethers we heard about through word of mouth or social media. Once, we even drove over an hour to a house party in a town none of us had ever heard of. We were that desperate. One Friday afternoon, Ian messaged our group chat. He said this girl he'd been talking to, Callista, invited him to a party about 20 minutes outside our town. Now, Ian had a bit of a thing for eccentric girls. You know the type, lots of piercings, dark eyeliner, into horror movies and obscure anime. Bryson joked that we were headed for a graveyard goth rave, and I kind of believed him. But Ian swore up and down that this was just a regular house party. Drinks, music, people, we didn't need much convincing. Bryson called his older brother Chris, who didn't drink and was usually down to be our designated driver. He agreed to take us. As we drove out into the foothills, Ian started complaining. He said Callista hadn't replied to any of his messages in hours. I figured she just ghosted him, which, well, Ian wasn't exactly the most subtle texter. A few minutes later, he said her entire profile had disappeared. We broke it to him, she blocked him. Probably decided to bring someone else to the party. Ian pouted in the back seat while Bryson and I tried to keep the mood light. After nearly half an hour of driving, we pulled into a quiet neighborhood nestled between thick rows of pine trees. The houses were spread out, the kind you see in mountain towns, old, wooden, with wide porches and wind chimes dancing in the cold air. But this house? This house was huge. Easily the biggest on the street. The porch lights were on, and people were walking up the front steps like it was a red carpet event. Ian wasn't ready to go in. Said he needed to get in the zone first. We parked a little down the road and pre-gamed near the car. The air smelled like pine and cold earth. We cracked a few beers and watched groups of people file into the house. Once Ian got a little buzzed, we made our way in. And right away, something felt off. The whole house was brightly lit. Not a single lamp or colored light bulb in sight, just bright, overhead lighting. Not what you'd expect at a college party. No strobe lights, no darkness to hide in. It almost felt clinical. The people there were dressed, oddly. Suits. Dresses. Like they were attending a banquet, not a party. It looked like some kind of formal gathering, think fundraiser or wine tasting, not beer pong and EDM. But hey, maybe it was just a themed party, right? We didn't want to look like total outcasts, so we played it cool. Still, the vibes were strange. The music didn't help. It wasn't hip-hop or pop or anything remotely upbeat. It was slow. Atmospheric. Like ambient horror movie music. No lyrics, just reverb-heavy instruments and echoing tones. Kind of trippy, if I'm being honest. We looked around at each other like, what is this place? Ian shrugged. He didn't know any more than we did. We walked through the house, admiring the ornate woodwork and strange art on the walls. There was alcohol everywhere, so we grabbed a few drinks and tried to blend in. That's when I noticed it. People kept glancing at me. Then looking away. At first, I thought I had something on my shirt. Or maybe my fly was open. But it was too consistent. I'd catch someone making eye contact, and the moment I looked back, their eyes would dart away. Not just once or twice. Over and over again. I figured it had to be the way we were dressed. Hoodies, jeans, sneakers, compared to everyone else in business casual or cocktail wear, we stuck out. Still, it wasn't just that. There was something in their looks, something almost knowing. Like they were expecting us. Or worse, waiting for us. Let me tell you, the four of us were honestly having a great time, despite the strange vibe inside the house. Well, maybe not all of us. Chris looked pretty bored and said he was gonna head out to smoke in his car. We figured it was because he hadn't had a single drink yet. A few minutes after he left, 3 girls came over and started chatting with us. It was kind of a shock. We weren't exactly the type who got approached like that. They were flirty right off the bat. Like, no hesitation. One of them, short blonde hair, bold smile, joked about an entry fee for talking to them. I laughed, but then I realized she was serious. They had a bottle of tequila, and let's be honest, there was no way we were turning it down. We each took a swig without overthinking it. Peer pressure hit hard, and none of us wanted to seem lame. From that point on, the 6 of us were kind of a unit, drinking, talking, occasionally dancing under dim lights. It felt like things were going surprisingly well. That's when I noticed something off. Tina, the girl I'd been vibing with, had this weird mark on her neck. It was a short, thin green line, like someone had drawn it with a Sharpie. It was faint, but under the light, I saw it clear as day. I debated asking her about it, but decided not to. What if it was a birthmark or a skin condition or something? I didn't want to embarrass her. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. It just looked wrong. Unnatural. And green, of all colors. Who wears green makeup like that? It didn't smear like makeup either. It looked permanent. I brushed it off and kept chatting with her, trying to stay in the moment. Eventually, I noticed Bryson heading upstairs with the girl he'd been dancing with. A little later, Ian followed with his date. That left me and Tina alone, and I was thinking maybe things were about to get interesting. But despite the buzz, I started to feel weird, jittery, sweaty, anxious. My heart was pounding for no reason. I told Tina I needed to use the bathroom and that I'd be right back. I wandered around and found one down the hall, but someone was already inside. I waited a few minutes, then finally the door opened. A tall guy stepped out. Older looking. He wore a white button-down shirt and loose linen pants like he was at a beach wedding or something. As I tried to slide past him into the bathroom, he bumped into me hard. I turned around, expecting a quick sorry. Instead, he just stared at me. Blank expression. Eyes locked on mine. He didn't move. Didn't blink. It was like he was sizing me up. I opened my mouth to say something but froze when I saw it. On his neck. The exact same green mark Tina had. Same length. Same placement. Same weird shade of green. My instincts were screaming, but I couldn't stop myself. I asked him what his deal was. He smirked, tilted his head, and in this calm, eerie tone said, "Who invited you?" Caught off guard, I blurted out the first name I could think of. "Callista," I said, the girl who had stood up Ian earlier. His smirk widened like he recognized it. Then it vanished, replaced by this cold stare. He looked around the house, then back at me. "Do you see Callista here?" he asked. I didn't know how to answer. I panicked and slammed the door shut, heart racing. What the hell had just happened? I tried to shake it off and walked back into the party, scanning the crowd. I couldn't stop thinking about the green line. Something was very wrong. I started casually checking people's necks. And that's when I saw it. Not once, but twice. 2 more people. 2 more green marks. Identical in size, color, placement. It was no coincidence. I couldn't find the tall guy anywhere. Instead, I kept drifting through the crowd, obsessively checking for the green marks. Not everyone had them, but the ones who did? They all had that same vacant expression. I needed to find my friends. Now. I made my way upstairs and thankfully ran into Bryson and Ian coming down. I pulled them aside into a quiet hallway. "Guys, we need to leave." "Now," I said. They looked at me like I'd grown a third eye. I tried to explain it quickly about the guy, the green marks, the vibe. Bryson laughed it off. "Dude, you're just drunk," he said. "You're mad because we hooked up and you didn't." I asked where their girls had gone, and both said almost the exact same thing. They'd been told to meet back upstairs in 20 minutes. I told them something was wrong. That I could prove it. They just needed to let me show them. Neither budged. I was just about to give up when Ian turned his head slightly, and I saw it. A line. Just like the others, but this one was red. I stepped back in shock. My voice cracked as I told him to check his neck. He brushed it off as makeup. But I wasn't imagining things. I turned to Bryson and checked his neck. Another red line. Same size. Same shape. Just red. Bryson finally looked uneasy. Ian still tried to joke it off, but now I could see the fear in his eyes too. "We're leaving," I said. Bryson nodded. Ian hesitated. He still wanted to meet his girl again. Just then, another guy walked past us slowly. He gave each of us a long look, like he was calculating something. I didn't like the way he moved. Like he knew we were onto something. Like we didn't belong there. The guy didn't say a word. He just stood there long enough for us to spot the faint green mark on his neck. That was all it took. Bryson and I bolted for the door, and Ian was right behind us. It felt like every eye in that room followed us, but no one moved to stop us. We sprinted to Chris's SUV and told him to drive fast. As we peeled away, both Ian and Bryson's phones lit up with non-stop messages. The girls were texting, asking why we had left. But how could they have known? They weren't even nearby when we left. Creeped out, my friends blocked them without saying a word. Whenever I tell people this story, they come up with wild theories. Some think it was some underground cult. Others say it was all in our heads. Honestly, I don't know what to believe. But I do know this: if that guy hadn't tipped me off, I don't think we'd have walked out of there. Anyway, that was a while ago. I'm now in my mid-20s, working on a master's in structural engineering at Western Ridge University in Vermont. I started the program a few months back. Life was pretty steady. Classes were tough, but manageable. I had made a few friends. The apartment I found was cheap, maybe too cheap, but it was functional. The landlord gave off weird vibes, though. I had my own car and didn't mind the 20-minute drive into town. The only downside was the neighborhood. It was quiet, almost too quiet, and just run down enough to keep most people away. But I didn't care. I was a guy, healthy, cautious, and focused on finishing school. I wasn't looking for trouble or excitement. Everything felt normal, until the day my backpack was stolen. I had left it in a corner of the student lounge while I went to the restroom. Dumb move, I know. When I came back, it was gone. No security footage, no witnesses, nothing. I was more frustrated than scared at first. My laptop, wallet, and apartment keys were inside. I spent the whole evening canceling cards, messaging professors, and asking my landlord to note the missing keys. It was a hassle, but manageable. At least, that's what I thought. A few days later, I came home after a late lecture. Tucked under my apartment door was a piece of paper. No envelope. Just a single note. It said, "I see you." No name. No signature. Just that. 3 words. My stomach dropped. I put it together instantly. Whoever took my backpack had gone through my laptop. They knew where I lived. That thought alone made my chest tighten. But then came the darker realization: they had my keys. Suddenly, the silence in my apartment felt suffocating. I spun around, half expecting someone to be standing behind me. My skin prickled as I quickly deadbolted the door. The next few days were a blur. More notes started showing up, slid under the door, left in the mailbox. Always handwritten. Always strange. One read, "I know what you did." Another, "Watch yourself." I kept trying to make sense of it. I'd never done anything wrong. Maybe a few dumb photos on my laptop. A couple of cringy journal entries. But nothing worth stalking someone over. Right? I thought about calling the police. But what would I say? No break-in. No threat. Just creepy notes. I told myself maybe it would stop on its own. Maybe it was just some twisted prank. Then one night, I was getting ready for bed. It was around 11 p.m. The sky was pitch black and my blinds were half closed. That's when I saw it, a flash. Like someone took a picture from outside. My heart skipped. I yanked the blinds shut and stared out into the dark. No movement. Just the empty sidewalk and my parked car under the street lamp. No one was there. But something had shifted. Over the next few days, small things started to change. At first, I blamed myself. My coat was thrown over the couch when I swore I'd hung it. My sneakers weren't where I'd left them. But one day, I came home and froze. My bedroom was wrecked. The bed was stripped. Sheets piled in a heap. My dresser drawers were wide open. Books scattered like someone had searched for something fast and carelessly. I called the cops. They showed up, asked a few questions, took a quick look around, but there was no sign of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. The report was filed, but there wasn't much they could do. I begged my landlord to change the locks. He brushed me off, saying the maintenance guy couldn't come for at least 48 hours. Unless it's an emergency, I can't help you, he said, completely indifferent. Emergency? I was terrified. Someone had been in my home. I kept calling, texting, even offering to pay extra, but he stopped responding altogether. That was yesterday. Last night, I barely slept. I kept the deadbolt locked, slept with a flashlight and a kitchen knife beside me. I'm thinking of buying new locks myself. But I'm not sure I could replace them without causing damage I'll be charged for. This morning, I skipped class. I've been sitting here, typing all this out. I don't know what else to do. I'm thinking of baiting whoever it is. Maybe they know my class schedule from my laptop. Maybe they'll come back when they think I'm gone. So I'm staying home. Lights off. Doors locked. I'll hide in the hallway closet and wait. If they show up, I'll be ready. I'll let you know what happens next. I've been holding this in for too long. I need to talk about it now. I had just ended things with my boyfriend of 2 years, Marcus. It wasn't a dramatic breakup, no screaming or cheating. But it wasn't peaceful either. We'd been arguing for months, and I think we both saw it coming. When it finally ended, I told myself it was the right call. I blocked him on everything, no texts, no socials, nothing. Just a clean break. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, in this cozy old building near the university campus. My place is on the second floor, which means I hear everything: cars, footsteps, late-night conversations outside. But a few nights after the breakup, I started hearing things that didn't sound normal. It wasn't the usual city noise. These were softer. Footsteps. A slow shuffle across the gravel. Almost like someone was standing just under my bedroom window. At first, I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. Breakups can mess with your head, right? But after the third night in a row, I started wondering if it was Marcus. He had never been aggressive, just quiet. Kind. Sweet, even. He wasn't the type to lash out. So, I told myself if it was him, he'd probably stop after a while. Besides, I was dealing with way too much. We had this massive group project due in my communications class, and I was responsible for editing and submitting the final video. It was a huge chunk of our grade. I stayed up all night working on it, fixing cuts, adjusting transitions, making sure it looked good. Around 11:50 p.m., I emailed it to our professor and finally let myself crash. The next morning, our group was scheduled to present. I was nervous, but also excited. We'd worked hard, and I felt confident. I had used Adobe Premiere, and the final cut was really clean, definitely better than most group projects I'd seen before. We were all sitting in this big, echoey lecture hall when the professor plugged in his laptop and opened the file I sent. The video started playing on the projector, and within 3 seconds, I knew something was very, very wrong. It wasn't our project. It wasn't even close. Instead, this grainy video filled the screen. Someone was sitting in front of the camera, wearing a cheap scream mask, the kind you buy at a dollar store around Halloween. But it wasn't silent. They were talking. The voice was distorted, like they were using some kind of voice changer. And what they said, it was disgusting. I won't repeat the words here. It was an unhinged rant, slander against me, the professor, the school, even the government. Just pure hate. Everyone in the room froze. I saw the professor's eyes go wide, but he let it play for a few seconds, maybe out of disbelief. When he finally paused it, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. I couldn't move. I felt glued to my seat, like my whole body went numb. The shame hit me in waves. The whole class was staring at me. I knew what they were thinking, even if no one said it. Finally, I bolted. Tears streaming, lungs tightening. I barely made it out of the lecture hall before the panic attack hit. I thought about going straight home, but I knew if I just disappeared, it would look worse. So, I waited outside the building, shaking, until class ended. Then I approached my professor. I could barely speak. I was sobbing, trying to explain that I swore I'd sent the right file. To his credit, he actually listened. He double-checked the email. Turns out, 2 videos had been sent. The first one, the correct one, was timestamped at 11:50 p.m. The second one was added minutes later, maybe around 12:10 a.m. It had replaced the file name. That discovery helped, but clearing things up with the university still took days of back and forth. IT had to get involved. I had to write a full report. Eventually, they ruled that my email account had been compromised. I changed my password immediately, blamed myself for using something too simple. And for a while, I thought that was the end of it. But I was wrong. About a week later, I woke up and realized I'd been logged out of my Snapchat. That only happens if someone else logs in. I felt sick. I knew whoever hacked my email had gone further. My heart dropped. There were things on my Snapchat pictures, messages I didn't want anyone to see. Things that could ruin me if they got out. I called the police, explained everything. They took it more seriously than I expected. Marcus agreed to talk to them, and to my surprise, he admitted something. He hadn't hacked anything, but right after our breakup, he had posted my phone number and email address on a shady online forum. Said he was venting and didn't think anyone would actually do anything with it. He swore he never shared my passwords, but I had used the same one for years. It wasn't hard to guess. The cops said that while Marcus was careless and reckless, he hadn't technically broken any laws. They couldn't trace the hack any further. And just like that, I realized someone out there, some stranger, now had all my private information. They could blackmail me. Or worse. I changed all my passwords. Deleted old accounts. Tried to move on. For a couple of weeks, everything was quiet. No weird emails, no surprises. Then came the Snapchats. It started with just one random account. No profile picture. No name. Just a username made of numbers. I didn't think much of it until I opened the message. It was a photo. Of me. Not a selfie. Not something I posted. It was a picture taken through my window. My back was to the glass. I had no idea someone was out there. I blocked them instantly. But more accounts popped up the next day. And the day after that. They never sent threats. Just more photos. Some were innocent. Others weren't. Some were from months ago. Ones I never saved. Things I thought were private. I stopped sleeping. Every time I turned off my lights, I thought someone was outside. Watching. Waiting. I reported the accounts again and again, but they kept making new ones. I stopped accepting requests. But the notifications still came. I knew it was the same person. I could feel it. I told the police, again. But they said without a name or traceable info, there was nothing they could do. It was out of their hands. The scariest part? They knew where I lived. I'd heard them outside my building before. What if they came back? What if they were already inside? I started staying at a friend's place a few nights a week. I kept my curtains drawn. I stopped using Snapchat. But even now, I still get those random requests from new accounts. Every time, it's like a warning. A reminder that they haven't gone away. So, if you're listening to this, especially if you're a young woman, please be careful. Don't reuse passwords. Don't trust cloud storage. And don't ever assume privacy online is real. I don't know if this story has an ending. I'm just hoping one day, it stops. Round Pushpin, have you ever felt like someone was watching you even when you were sure you were alone? Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way.